Okay, a very good afternoon to all. On behalf of the organizers, I welcome you to this webinar, which is being jointly organized by the working group comprising the National Scientific Committees Theophilos, the National Scientific Committee on Intangible Cultural Heritage, the NSC on Cultural Landscapes, and the Northeast Zone under the aegis of ICOMOS India. As the National Committee of ICOMOS International, which is the advisory body of the World Heritage Committee for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention, ICOMOS India provides a forum where stakeholders concerned with conservation, protection, rehabilitation, and enhancement of cultural heritage resources can meet to exchange information and views on the principles and practices in the field. Now, the year 2022 is actually unique for two very special reasons. It is the 50th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention 1972, and we are celebrating 75 years of Indian independence, which is being celebrated as Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav by the Government of India. Both are very important anniversaries, and together they provide an opportunity for reflection and introspection of our conservation approaches and achievements with respect to the principles of the World Heritage Convention, as well as their rooting in the Indian constitutional provisions to ensure or to check whether we have achieved meaningful actions on ground. So as a joint celebration of the two events, this working group and ICOMOS India shall be organizing a series of programs, and this webinar is the first event. We have invited 3 speakers to discuss about the learnings from their respective researches on the role and importance of the cultural perspective when dealing with heritage. May I request Dr. Naveen Piplani, President ICOMOS India, who is also Director, Creative Cluster at Sushant University, to give us the opening address and initiate the program.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shubhru Gupta. And I'm deeply grateful to Professor Nalini Thakur, who has been, I think, driving this whole initiative with her team of extremely enthusiastic and interested members of ICOMOS India and of the conservation community at large. I wish to welcome all the dignitaries, all the speakers and the eminent panelists for this session today. And I also wish to add a third very happy reason amongst the 2 other anniversaries. That is 2022 also is the 10th year anniversary of the setting up of ICOMOS India, which was set up in 2012. So we got this hat-trick celebration of anniversaries of premier institutions and policies in the field of heritage conservation. And no better opportunity to celebrate this with all of you today. I must also highlight the fact, which I always, I think, do, that Professor Nalini Thakur is also the first trained conservation architect of the Free India, who got trained at the University of York and then came back and led the conservation movement in the institutional framework of the School of Planning and Architecture. And the discipline owes a lot to her contribution. So there are a lot of, I think, happy things coming together as part of this event, which worldwide, I think the whole idea of World Heritage Convention worldwide has been so very well celebrated that some of the critical nuances or let's say the challenges of the convention have been put to the back burner. And time and again, these challenges have to be brought to the high limelight and discussed in the context in which we are in at the moment. That is the free Indian context, independent Indian context, which also means liberation from the colonial mindset and the thought processes, the Eurocentric thought processes that many of us have carried and still carry along in one form or the other in our professional and academic and research agendas. So so, a gathering like this, a seminar like this is very important with people like Professor Thakur and Professor A.G. Krishnamenon and Professor Sanjib, Kumar and Professor Rana, who've kind of seen the entire landscape, the intellectual landscape, the scholarly discourse, time and again hovering around the Eurocentric approaches to the understanding of heritage and then to the conservation and management, which then happen to, get tied down to the original idea. And somewhere we try and bring back or bring to the fore the traditional Indian knowledge systems and the traditional wisdom that has resided in the Indian subcontinent and in our people who have practiced heritage conservation and management and understanding and analysis of what is heritage in the first place in a very different flavor than what most of us are at least used to. And it is therefore very important that to keep rediscovering, keep revisiting, keep questioning, keep arguing about the fact that what we have in front of us, there is something much more that is not in front of us. And what is in front of us needs to be decolonized. It needs to be explored further. It needs to be dug deeper, like in archaeology, and find out the whole idea of the Patrimonio Mundial, which is the world heritage, the notion of world heritage. And we've had, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is the world as a whole. I mean, these ideas have been in the cultural landscape in the traditional Indian context, and they may have now been redefined by modernity and all these other movements that have taken over. But these are quite at the root of the understanding of Indian knowledge system, and therefore the idea of history and heritage and conservation and the rest of it. And so therefore, I feel that this is a very apt moment. This is a very critical moment that the experts today are going to be discussing the learnings and putting forth the Indian aspects of how we see world heritage in our context, and how therefore our approaches to conservation and management need to be redefined at the 50th year anniversary of World Heritage Convention, at the 75th year anniversary of India's independence, and put heritage conservation in India in that context, that we are now no longer colonized mindset. We are a free mindset. With that, I thank all of you once again for taking time out on this busy working afternoon. And I am deeply grateful to all the speakers today and hope to attend as much as I can. But as all of you will also appreciate that being in a university system, we do get called for one thing or the other. But as much as possible, I will be here. Thank you so much, and all the very best once again.
Thank you very much, Naveen, for initiating the program and for underlining the importance of today's theme, the traditional knowledge systems and the need for this discourse. May I now request Professor Nalini Thakur to introduce the program. But before she introduces the program, I would again introduce Professor Nalini Thakur for the newcomers in the group. Professor Nalini Thakur is the coordinator of the National Scientific Committee Theophilos and was formerly the professor of architectural conservation at SPA Delhi. She is very well known within the conservation fraternity and has worked on some very important projects like the Integrated Management Plan for Hampi World Heritage Site, Management Plan for Mehrauli Archaeological Park, and Management Plan for Champaner Pavagadh Archaeological Park in Gujarat, which is a World Heritage Site. So over to you, Nalini, ma'am.
Thank you, Shubhru. And first of all, thank you, Naveen. That was an excellent start to our program. And I'm really, very happy that you said all the right things. Well, I'm trying to explain what this program is about, and that is what this program is about. First of all, Thank you for coming to this program, and good afternoon to everyone. And now I will start. I first want to point out what is the cultural perspective and how does one see the world and work and do conservation, everything through our cultural perspective. I would like to sort of try to try to sort of explain that. So the world as culture is one of the presentations today by Paul Schaefer, sets the tone for the discourse of today. Because this thing talking about culture, world as culture, for me is a very important thing that has come from the West today. So that point I want to underline. We shall go into the term cultural perspective and its meaning in the Indian context. To demonstrate, we must look into our own selves to rediscover our own outlook to the world around, which allows a more holistic picture of the outside world. Emanating from within ourselves, our picture of the world is based on our cultures, beliefs, and values that created the human-made contents that stand on the ground and the underlying knowledge systems that supported the physical contents. This is important, and it is this which differentiates us from our colonial lords and the international influences from the silo systems that is prevalent from the Descartesian times. Conservation of built cultural resources, as we understand it today, was born after the world wars, and grew to become an important sector all over the world, with careful protection and safeguard of our surviving heritage sites and buildings. In India, to succeed in this focus area of cultural resources, the idea of cultural perspective becomes very critical. As the conservation movement has taken precedence, it is imperative that we figure out a grounded system for protection and management from our own cultures, which come from our own cultures and from our cultural perspectives as an independent country. So some points are put here. We have to define and explain the outlook to the exterior world from this cultural perspective. This is an attempt actually at a holistic worldview to approach conservation from the holistic perspective of nature, with focus on rivers and other elements of nature, to explain the wealth of ecological and technological traditional knowledge systems that can be rediscovered through research for the protection and safeguard of a complex cultural resource entity, primarily natural, which is connected to cultural, because we see it in that kind of holistic way. The cultural perspective and the holistic approach belongs to a different system of thinking and understanding. I think that is a very important point, because there's a lot of confusion about it. It is not part of the Western system. It is another system which is holistic, and so you have to see it for its own sake and develop it, completely. And that is where the challenge is. It is a different thing. Okay, the holistic approach, integrated method, and interdisciplinarity have been the exploration in the first module of developing the philosophical basis. This concerns really the foundation program that I was, and the method I was using, and my program, which uses the holistic Indian civilizational studies method, in my teaching in SPA before. So I have followed that, and I have been practicing the, this holistic approach and the cultural perspective for almost 40 years. And I can see everything quite differently and no more like how other people see it. And I think that's very important, and because it's quite relevant to the kind of contents and heritage that we have. Answering, then the next point I want to talk about is answering the questions raised regarding the title Research Studies Leading to Knowledge and Wisdom for Conservation in the Indian Context. I am grateful for all those who questioned me during the preparation time when we were planning this out, because it is brought out some things, and I brought it out for in the open discourse. It is very important, because normally what happens is when all these when I have mentioned many of these things, research, but somehow it never says how this research is different from what other researches are going on. You know, I have never really gone to explain, and nobody has challenged me and asked me, what is it you're saying? So that is why I think it is important, because though that is the really crux, and that is why this whole thing, this whole program is called Research Studies Leading to Knowledge and Wisdom. Now, let me explain this. What is the relationship between research and action, and say correct action? Here, there is a relationship, and not all research lead to the right action. So you have to be very careful. How do you choose your research, and how do you do that research, and what is it you want to know, and how do you make a path to get to that goal that you are trying? And that's generically fine. But when you are looking at Indian heritage, which is coming from a different perspective, and it is also a different system altogether, so you have to think from that angle for even your research in heritage areas. So that is what I'm trying to say, because in that case, it becomes quite different. And if you see the kind of people who are talking today, they will not be here if they had not followed what they believed in. So that is how, we have Dr. Rana and Dr. Sanjib, because they have actually doing different kind, they have followed a different path, and they've also stayed long in their paths. And that is how they've got enough to be able to say that I'm glad I can call them, because we are not finding too many people who have done this kind of work today also, because everyone has been following a kind of, I don't know, the way that is supposed to be done, or maybe the status quo way, or whatever it is. Okay, so that is it. What is the relationship between knowledge and correct sustainable management? That is something we have to explore. And wisdom is very good, but not everyone is able to come to that level, I would like to say. So I think we will settle for the standard, accepted standard is knowledge, but certainly not awareness, to build an informed society or community that can participate positively in conservation of their heritage and their city. So research and studies are the tools employed in scholarship. So also here on the standing on the real ground is where all the contents from ground upwards are our heritage with all its layers, and in front of everything, what stands is our own legacy. So this is what is the subject on which we have to research. That is what we have to do. And so it's possible that we really can't follow the sort of, the usual way of doing research. We have to find new ways of learn, which are relevant here. Then how else can we understand Dr. Rana's presentation and Dr. Sanjeev's presentation? They are all looking at their own ground from a holistic and from an Indian perspective. One point to note is that it is long-term engagement is essential. It is imperative that to be experimental, and we should utilize and explore new and relevant research methods. Here, I am not really telling you what are the research methods, because I don't think we can give you that kind of tips for these, So instead, I have put it across that you have to discover it yourself and find out. And it is different from other people. It is long term, and it is based from this perspective. I have given you the background for it. Now let us examine the far-reaching implication of the World Heritage Convention. to India and future of conservation within the context of the cultural diversity. You know, here India is a region within the, or sub-region within the UNESCO system. And earlier than 75, no, the later, what is later than 75 years, we were, before that 75 years, we were a colonized country by the British for 300 years. What does that mean between UNESCO and India? Is there today one dialogue, a one-to-one dialogue? Is it possible to have one-to-one dialogue? Because the convention, which is actually a law, an international law, and in which India has ratified, you have to take it that it is a law, but it is not a colonial kind of law. It is an international law. It means that all of us in India are all free people, and we have to talk and dialogue with them one-to-one. But you know, human nature is such, there is a problem that everyone is, you know, there is a lot of this power game and all kind of games that go on, you know, and then we get also somehow caught in that. So it is very important for us, you know, because this whole thing that you have about British, that you have this convention, and then you have a region, and this region, I've already told you, is very different from what this convention people know about, the big bosses in the convention people know about. So that is something we have to somehow understand and know how to handle that if we want to have a equal footing, one-to-one dialogue. Yeah, but I have to tell you, this what I keep talking these days about the brave new world and the new world order of the 20th century. You know, just imagine in the 20th century, after the world wars, the whole world decided to make international organizations for a lot of noble things. You know, and we know by now how much of those noble things are working, whether it is peace, whatever, you know, but you know, the same world order through this World Heritage Convention and UNESCO brings the whole world under one umbrella. And you have to know that the whole world under this one umbrella is not equal. They are not uniform. There is so much of differences in that. So that is what you have to, you know, and that is what the new world, the brave new world, and all the big people who are very euphoric and they were so enthusiastic, they did not realize. And I think that is what I want to, you know, point out to you, that today, if India does not have enough World Heritage sites, India is not properly also, you know, inscribed or properly represented in different categories. It just means that we have not been one-to-one with them. We were not able to be one-to-one with them, and we have to start. And I think let us use this World Heritage Convention's 50th anniversary to start improving our dialogue with UNESCO. That is what I'm about the World Heritage Convention. I was just hoping that is what we should start doing that. And this is a good opportunity for that. So anyway, however, however, the Brave New World Intergovernmental Organization, UNESCO, that undertakes to also decided to, under this convention, undertook to protect and safeguard monuments of outstanding heritage of universal significance under its umbrella. It is a very good thing to happen, but is it easy to do that? How do you make it happen? You know, unless we know how to do these things, we have to be clear about it. So this new world order and its implication in the post-colonial world of India, the reality, the differences in the, you know, in so many sectors that are there, the differences, and within India also there are so many differences. So all this makes it much more challenging for this region. However, the 72 convention represents a unique movement in our human development. reflects, and I don't think ever in the world has it ever been done before, that you actually, as one body, decide to take all the heritage together and think about it. We have never done it before, but we never realized how challenging it was, how difficult it was, and how much more we had to do to make it happen, and what we as Indians should be doing about that is what I'm trying to ask everybody in this 50th anniversary year. So it reflects from the international to the regional, giving direction and form to the regional, that is the Indian nation. The need for our own paradigm to prevail and a need for a paradigm shift is required for us here. That is now the Amrit Mahotsav will ensure the Indian nation to, is another important anniversary that has come, and it sort of gives a kind of hope to the country to celebrate with confidence and knowledge to build a meaningful sort of heritage system. So it gives that kind of hope to all of us, So, we have already know what it is. We've heard a lot about it. And I'm thinking the opportunity presented by both the Amrit Mahotsav and the World Heritage Convention will be just a regeneration, which will enable the regeneration of the Indian heritage buildings, sites, cities, and regions. So then how do we, what did we do as a group, this working group with Theophil, is we made a celebration plan to realize the potential. So NSC Theophilus attempts a double celebration by, now it's a triple celebration, by integrating the two main themes mentioned to enable national and international levels to support each other for the best protection and sustainable management of our legacy of outstanding cultural resources. So that is what we are trying to do here. The celebration continues with a series of programs that focus on the Indian context, and the first being the one that we are doing, which are happening right now. And first, in making the celebration plan, yes, we also put some attention onto the preparation and how the organization and organizing work was done. And I think Shubhru has mentioned it a bit in her introduction, that the planning process and the process of how forming the working groups and how we all work together, and we work together, and we really kept to that group, and we kept to all the rules of working together over the whole time. And yeah, it was sometimes a bit restrictive, but I think that is the only way that ICOMOS can realize its own potential in this whole scenario. Unless they learn how to work together and work in a systematic way, and then they can present themselves to everybody as one group of heritage, professionals and expertise. And there will be nobody else, because there are so many people in this group who are all, who are in heritage, who have done all kinds of heritage specializations. So I think we have to realize that. And so that needs some process in the way we work. And I felt that during this celebration, one should also try to see how to start the process and keep to a process, so that kind of good, that we'll start getting used to doing that way. So I think we have, so we have two groups. One group is working on this also and will continue working till December. And there is another group we have already decided of a working group, which will work on the education, new education and management, and responsible management, which starts in, January. So overall, I think we have quite a few programs. Below are listed the series of programs organized by NSC Theophilus and in joint partnership with focus on the Indian context, integrating the two themes, and in India with international. Okay, the first one is today, which is called Research, Study and Knowledge, which I told you. These are fundamental conceptual ideas, but now even the ideas are different when you look at it from the Indian perspective, cultural perspective. So the content and what you find out from that will be quite different. So I think that is what is important. You have to be open to it. In October, we are opening to we are trying to do event to realize the potential of the World Heritage Sites of the Northeast of the country, because we have Northeast Zone also as a part of our working group. Currently, Northeast is not represented in the current inscriptions. The program will focus on the potential of World Heritage Sites of the Northeast and will be led by the Northeast partner of the, the zonal partner of Northeast Zone. And in December, we are thinking of doing one on Majuli, a whole program on Majuli. If you know, Majuli is in the Northeast, in Assam, but it has gone to the World Heritage 4 times and not made it. And I think we have to try to analyze it and see it has to, and ask some questions about it, why this has not happened, because, and we have a lot of people within our ICOMOS who have worked on that, including myself. So I think it will be a good opportunity to have a nice big discussion on the Majuli, on the Majuli place, which is a river island in the biggest river of India. And the whole inside, and we are having a talk by Dr. Sanjib in this itself, in this program, who will really show you a glimpse of what it is and what a great cultural landscape it is. And we will be talking about that. And of course, it is connected because it never got inscribed, even though it went 4 times. We have to get to the bottom of that. And after that, that will be more on landscape, cultural landscape, the Majuli one. And the other 2 will be on the education and responsible management, new interdisciplinary education in January, and in March, something else. Okay. So I think about all, this program is very fundamental. That's what I will conclude with, because the event is proposed as a basic foundational fundamental program to define the philosophical basis for conservation. One objectives is this is the first fundamental program that tries to shape the philosophical basis underlying the collective cultural base upon which the cultural resources protection system is built from, and also conservation policies to actions. An attempt at holistic worldview, it explores the outlook required and the view of cultural resources, and how to view the cultural resources, and how to work with cultural resources, and how to do all the different kind of studies, connected to cultural resources and analysis from this cultural perspective. That is it. That's what we are trying to do. So it is all to develop the philosophical base for sustainable conservation of world heritage sites from the perspective of both culture and nature. As I told you, we have been very holistic, and I hope we bring out this whole thing about the cultural landscape. I think a little bit Dr. Rana will be doing that also, because we'll talk to you about what is the geography here. It is very holistic, and it is totally looking, it's all cultural, religion, everything is in one. And, and so there is no differentiation at all. And this kind of differentiation is really a much more non-Indian way of looking, understanding. And to develop further future research and works and discourse on the rich heritage of India. That's all I have. So, thank you. I think that's all I have. I've just given you a kind of basis for why this particular thing has been done, and what were the thinking behind, underlying, and that actually it is from a different family altogether, and not part of the kind of family that we are generally which are working on. So there is, what I'm saying is, there is a big change that we all have to make if we really want to, and let us do that, because this is our 75th year of Indian independence. And at least I think that is something we should come out as a, independent thinking, proud who understand, well informed about their own country and their culture and their cultural resources. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am, for setting the stage for today's program. We now begin with the presentations by our invited speakers. May I introduce Dr. Rana P.B. Singh, who's our first speaker for the day. Dr. Rana Singh's presentation will be titled Cultural Landscapes of India, Appraising Heritage Ecology through RWYC. It's a concept that which he has been working on. In the Indian, Dr. Rana P.B. Singh, especially for ICOMOS members, doesn't need much introduction. He is very well known, and he was formerly the Professor of Cultural Landscapes and Heritage Studies and head of the Department of Geography at Banaras Hindu University, India. He is an expert and a voting member of the ICOMOS International Scientific Committee on Places of Religions and Ritual, PRERICO. He is a contributing member of ICOMOS IFLA International Scientific Committee on Cultural Landscapes. For the last 45 years, he has been researching in the fields of cultural landscapes, sacred scapes, and pilgrimage studies, heritage sites and planning, and has done field studies in Japan, Sweden, Italy, Korea, and China. He has delivered special lectures and seminars in different parts of the world, and his publications include 340 papers and 43 books and anthologies. For the last few years, he has been collaborating with Professor Olympia Niglio on the projects related to cultural heritage, spiritual awakening, RWYC, which is reconnecting with your culture, and enlightened and deep-rooted education. Professor Rana Singh, over to you, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of my ideas, what we are practicing and doing itself. So that is very much thinking in the Indian route, what Dr. Nalini Thakur already indicated. So it is more, you can say, from the root side. And therefore, some of the terminology, what we are using, that is based on our ancient classical tradition. So cultural landscape of Bharat, India. I'm not saying only India in Western term, Indian term also. Raising heritage ecology to RWIC, reconnecting with your culture. Just to say that when we are going to use the word geography, most of us think this is a subject which has already been challenged long ago. So let me say like this. The definition which was already accepted in 1984 Congress, Washington Congress, geography is the study of cultural landscape. Representing, this is now edition recently, representing the alive earth Gaia. This whole Gaia theory by James Lovelock, who just on 26th of July died at the age of 50, the master of Gaia theory. So geography is not a subject, it is a way of understanding, a vision of creating, an art of making, a bridge of interconnecting, a spirit of awakening, and science of realization, what we say, anubhav, leading to the revelation, anubhuti. So that is just to give you background. Later on, you can link it with what Nalini Thakur is trying to say like this. So here, first idea is that when we are trying to link East and West together and then coming to define, the landscape is to be seen, not only the simple term of visuality, what is called landscape is intimately linked with a new way of visioning the world as rationally ordered, designated, and harmonious. And Karl Sauer, the man who introduced this Kulturlandschaft saying from the German tradition in 1925, what he used to say, linking geography, geography was inseparable from human history in as much as the earth, its resources and its environment, and profoundly affected by humanity. The history of geography is the history of thinking about the concept of environments, places, and spaces altogether that what we call cultural landscape. In Indian context, in 1950s, of course, that was archaeology and history of art. It goes to S.D. Sankalia from the Deccan College, who has written 2-3 books and explained all those things. But that was not accepted in the rest part of the other disciplines. Just to say, recently what was debated by another great philosopher, from, of course, from geography. He wrote a book that is called Romantic Geography. So what he tried to say, which is very close to our Indian thought, that's why I am quoting. Inside, inherent, exposed, imagined, symbolized, co-shared, maintained, accepted the changes in passage of time, and altogether it evolved its cosmos to be called a cultural landscape. This is the new debate. They are not talking about the technical things, what you know our Unesco people are saying. Then we are coming this, that when we are going to emphasize more about the Indian root, the credit goes to Nalini 2011, when she wrote an article and given a phrase that was first time used. Generally, we are talking landscape of India, landscape and India, cultural landscape in India. But that was used by Nalini Thakur, Indian cultural landscape. And she has defined it. So let me read this because the whole idea is based on this, the critical examination of what to be added. But basement is this one. Can be called intellectual landscape, a collection of religious, cultural, and physical meanings ascribed to geographical components through collective memory entered on the ground, shaped in the real world and real time landscape, in active engagement of communities over generations, implying nature and land from physical to metaphysical. The ICL, Indian Cultural Landscape, is a repository of the collective perception of geography, where memory, information, and imagination converge to shape the landscape. The physical form of landscape that is still survive have a capacity to regenerate itself when association, ideology, and continuity are re-established to engage the contemporary mindset. That is the main core. Now one has to take it as a basement, and then you have to link, and then you have to see there is some gap to be added. Now, after 11 years of cultural landscape, but the title was different. Here is cultural landscape of India, not Indian culture. The cultural landscape should be viewed as a situated event of text enacted and performed and experienced through all the senses. The idea of cultural landscape can be seen in ancient practices such as circumambulation and immersion in bodies of water that sustain engagement with natural elements. That was based on some of the case study of the ancient cities by Amita Sinha, and that book was published in 2020. Cultural landscapes. Now altogether, what I have tried to put in like this: the Indian cultural landscape, Bharatiya Sanskritika Bhudishya. This is very on the Vedic text. Is the frame of geography. It is not geography itself, but the split of the earth in terms of the Gaia is a technical word used by Swedish philosopher, geographicality of environment where nature, man, interconnectedness converged in the cosmic frame of visuality, representation, communication, companionship, and conscience, physical and metaphysical. The cultural landscape gets transformed and absorbed, stimulus on the pathway of succession, that is the past, sustenance the present, sustainability for the future. Thus, it shows the regional context while having the reciprocity of the distinctiveness and generality, bridging between locality and universality. The ICL should also be viewed as a process and an expression through an observer's attitude and background in terms of 3 M's: the meanings inherent, metaphor, how it is explained, and the regional context. This is as a whole, and that's why the term used by Paul, you are going to listen, Paul, that it is all that universe, holistic, something like that. Detailed things from the Western critical side, he will talk about. This is the way in 1968, S.C. Malik has proposed an idea which is very close to Nalini, and that is giving the totality in this frame that they all based on belief systems. In Indian terminology, it has 2 frames. One is start in terms of space, other about the tradition. The upper side is space, lower side is tradition, and this way that is start from the individual, sacralization, local, social, cultural, and then ecological. Here individual, king, clan, village, and region. This as a whole, and that you find art like this conch shell. The same representation based on Bhagavad Gita, 11th chapter, the cosmic frame of Krishna presented in conch shell. Same the map you can see all these artistic view added altogether that you can call the Indian cultural landscape. That's when we are talking another term we are using in mostly through the Western context, that is called heritage. That is another problem. We translate it to virasa, which is no way fitting into Indian terminology because we have to go to Vedic and Upanishadic context. The word is Indian tradition, heritage is called dharohar, which is a combination of the two words, two places, Satpat Brahmana and the Atharvaveda, giving the reference of that, and that dharohar word is explained with the help of this Varaha incarnation of Vishnu. That's why I have added here. And that is befitting to the Gaia theory of the biological science and alive earth concept, what Nalini used to say, the totality, cosmos, or wholeness, something like that. That is how it should be explained in terms of the root, that is Shrota, and identity, Asmita, a framework of continuity of interconnectedness and a personality of the culture. The man who introduced that, so that needs a revision, change, or expansion of that. That was Karl Marx in 1925. That he translated word in English, and that's why he's considered to be father or innovator of cultural landscape concept. Just to cite his very commonly cited this quote from Sauer: the cultural landscape is fashioned from a natural landscape by a cultural group. Culture is the agent, the natural area, the medium, the cultural landscape is the result. Cultural landscapes are literary and imprint of human history. That was a philosophic context, and many representative analyses, interpretation written about all this. Okay, now let me put it that how this whole concept of Indian cultural landscape to be seen in frame of global understanding. People form a sense of ourselves and the sense of our place, what we call geographicality, at varying the range of scales, spatiality, time frame sequentiality, functions, activity, mobility for pilgrimages, deeper sacrality, and our mental states, belief system. We begin from the local scale, and here we first experience the sacred message through the spirit of place, or what we call genus loci, and from there proceed to experience this spirit and power at a larger scale. That's why we say locality, that is humanity, to cosmology, that is sublimity, linking three cosmogonic cosmos, frame, micro, meso, and microcosmos. This is another perspective to see when we are talking about man and cosmic relationship based on the ancient classical Hindu tradition, that how the different life pattern is going on. I'm not going to discuss all this. This is in the form of long paper. I will submit later on. Some of the now examples of how in a different perspective, it's already cited so many religious traditions. Here is a typical example you can see what is going on theoretically. In the left-hand side, you can see the 5 main yatras of Kashi out of a 54 yatra. These 5 representing 5 gross elements, and altogether make a balance at what we call in practical terms, and Planiji has already mentioned. So that is theoretical perspective in the left-hand side. Now we see here is practical. It is based on aerial photograph and very detailed GPS system measurement, all that. You see the system, how much similarity it is. We find about 100% outer circle is exactly the same, the way it is described in the text. So that is another perspective to see when you are going to map the landscape and different traditions existing in the landscape. We have to go to the whole metaphysical traditions and theoretical description in the ancient text and see how they're interconnected and interpreted. Is there another perspective, what we call from the Western tradition, we always used to say that Shiva Linga is considered to be erotic symbolism. Thanks God that famous physicist Prisoner Papra has already mentioned, described this in his famous book, The Tao of Physics. It is not like that. It is a combination of the 3 stages: evolution, sustenance, and then completion of that one. That is the Shiva Linga. That's why the sound phenomena also to be linked like this. This is all based on the theoretical consideration from Prisoner Capra and the series of 3-4 other authors. So just to give that idea, when we are going to link all these things to our own tradition, then we have to link the Western, what is going on, link it together, and then say that this is something special, what we can do like this. Here is a typical example In that context, when we are talking about the practice and usage of cultural landscape in the ancient past and how this has been continued, this is the idea of what we call in technical terminology spatial transposition. It means prana pratishtha of the original place to the next place, other place, and then you say this is equal to the original one. So that is the process. The whole process, a concept that is called spatial transposition. The wonderful example is here you can see this map of India, 30 Jyotirlingas, that is 12 Jyotirlingas, first time described in the one Parva of Mahabharata, and then it has been transferred by 8th, 9th century in the sphere of Varanasi. What we have tried to do, the study, going to original place, then coming to Varanasi, taking photographs, reducing in that manner, then we find 70% of that replica is maintained at this place. It is not only copy. This is the same process. And on the other hand, they perform the rituals as it was performed, or it is performed at the original place. This way they have tried to do. So you can say that is the macrocosmos India level. Then you can say mesocosmos. It is at the second level. And then here comes a microcosmos. Only one linga, having all the miniature form there. And in the same form coded. So you can touch like one here, then 1 year, and then one going to India level. This is unique thing in the culture when we are talking about distinct features of Indian cultural landscape. This is another example, same example, just little bit elaboration. We have surveyed 212 such sites, pan-India level pilgrimages are holy centers, and then how they have been replicated. So left-hand side, you find the map of India, and then how they have been replicated. All this happened before 9th century. And we have the huge textual tradition to see that has not been properly yet studied. Of course, there are papers, but not in detail now. This is another example. Now we see the similar, another typical example, and now 2 levels. The one level is based on the Valmiki Ramayana. So at least we can say 900 to 1000 BC, in the Western date. So according to that, Lord Rama was born in Ayodhya and then walked around. That is a whole yatra going on, Banagama, and going to Anuradhapuri and Sri Lanka. But if Rama Avatar Sharma has plotted, he has already traveled for 6 months. A devotee is still alive. He is about 89 years old. And he has prepared the map and we have helped. This is the map. Okay. Now in Ayodhya, recently, just last year, that was proposed, now it is already going on, proposed Ramayana circuit. So some of the selected site of all India travel can be replicated in the manner and same way citation from Ramacharita and some of the sacred verses, people started the pilgrimage system. In miniature form, you are going to understand the whole India. Then again, that is in performance form in the lower side, you can say like Ram Leela, which is already part of the World Unesco. There is another building, which is unique building, Banaras University, based on all that metaphysical tradition and description. So you can find the 5 semicircles, Panchabhutas, 5 gross elements, and then 7 up, 7 down. And the point is, axis mundi is Kashi Vishwanath. 7 up, that is chakra, and 7 down, that is called Bhuvana Kosha. Typical example, but it goes just to formulate in this form what we see today to Patrick Gadis, a great man of biology, and later on who is considered to be father of the civic sense and other such organic sense of planning, etc. Now, see the another idea. When we are talking about like goddesses all over India, so there are 2 levels. One is called 51 Satyapita, and there is 108. So we have taken this 51. Plotting the map, this is not simple map. It's a very complex map based on a high resolution GPS and made. This is not one day, this is nothing like my study, this is a whole thing study. So when you see this is something unique thing, you can say vertical, the longitude, the latitude, exactly the 2 points are the same longitude and same latitude. Who has built this? Before 9th century. Then you see the replica that is in Lucknow, Maranj Road, that is only about 15 kilometers away from the main Lucknow city. They have made the miniature of all the 51. So some particles, dust, stone, or some portion of those, all these sites, and then the replica has been made in this. This is the unique, just recently opened, only 7 years ago that temple has been opened. This is another typical example of this spatial transportation. That is the another perspective based on the tantric system of the goddesses. Now here you can see this is unique place nearby to Varanasi. That is again based on the same 51 goddess concept, but that is not listed in the 51. But when we go to another level, 108, that this is Sarkar's work, and then we have done very detailed GPS measurement and then other electromagnetic waves. Anyway, the result is here, something unique. That God said this red line you can see, apex is down. But it is describing that this is really in the landscape. And then Shiva, the apex is up. And then you can cross half the way exactly at the center is a north. Axis mundi. From there, all this nature. And that has the deepest intensity level of gravity. So that is another thing using the modern technology, try to understand the deeply rooted messages of cultural landscape. That is another perspective to see when we are plotting this. This is a micro level study that was regional level, micro level like Varanasi. So we have done survey for 96 temples and shrines of goddesses, and then try to convert it at how they are going to set in the landscape. As you go from outer to inner, intensity is increased. As you go from inner to outer, it is going to be distorted. And this is the simple law of theoretical physics. So that is also something important. There's so many metaphysical ideas. And then you can see, so it is nothing like contradiction, rather than in some way you can say they are supporting each other. Okay, that is the same thing elaborated. Now coming to the micro level study, like one temple with all the details, each and every site, the god, goddesses, signs, images to be plotted, and then try to see the alignment and orientation and use the text and then describe it. This is the typical example of Durga Kund area in Varanasi. Now, another typical example, one among the three such pilgrimage journey in the whole world. The first most famous was Santiago de Compostela, second is Shikoku, and third is Panchkoshi. Panchkoshi Yatra developed about 20 places historically in whole part of India, but more or less distorted. Here comes the situation in Varanasi. It is intact what was in 8th, 9th century. Now you say how it is possible. The city was destroyed 3 times. Okay, city area destroyed, not outer side. And when we have measured this GPS and high resolution electromagnetic, that was a project sponsored by National Science Foundation US and partly sponsored by NASA, the University of Colorado Astrophysics Department work. The result is lower side. They have been just surprising to say that how this unique things. So this reminds Marcia Iliade, 1955, Sacred and Profane book, what he used to say, not she, he. The name is Marcia, but he. He said that a time will come, people will realize it is nothing like that human being has selected some place for making such temple in the ancient world. It is not like this. It is opposite way. That those places having something strong power inherent at that particular site, and that attracted great sages who has done something work, and as a memorial in course of time, temple and shrine developed. Now it is true. Thomas Berry work in the Western world, that is already proved now. And that's how the new field is called in astronomy, cultural astronomy. How culture has adapted all this and converted. This is another typical example to understand the Indian cultural landscape with its distinct character. This is something unique till date, at least few months earlier, you can say, this is the unique place in the whole world. Exactly on 14th of January, sun legend crossing 2 sites and going live. This is again the part of that project. Then first time in the history we find that the line has been drawn, and that is called exact cosmic north is plotted on the earth. The date is 1036. This is not our date. This is date from the NASA archives and then National Science Foundation archives. It is published in the Science Journal. And many people worshipping and doing this in their own manner. They say, oh, this is a folk, this is Andhviswas and superstition. Okay, there may be something like that, but there are other things also we don't know in detail, and that's why we say this is not like this, but now this is fitting. The whole idea of the 12 months and how the sun rays moving, why 12 solar sign, this all has been developed in a unique cultural landscape that is based on the solar sign and worship. This is another example. Another example here is 7, this is Big Dipper, 7 stars. And there are 7 temple sites that history goes to about 10 to 11th century in Ayodhya. 5 of them are in deserted shape. Now, thanks God, some special program started since last year. They are going to be renovated. So we have done again the same geomagnetic survey of all that. So here you can see this lower side plotted, and then according to which Puran is describing this manner. And when we have plotted like this, so lower side you can see in the sky, then you say here is the land, and then you see the textual description. This is the way that the whole deeper thought coming up, and we can give a message that what we can understand from the stage of cultural landscape. Gaya, which is one among the 3 such places that says Tri Asthali Setu. That was a 12th century text, so that says that these are the 3 pillars when the soul go from earth to the heaven. The first one is Prayag, then Kashi, and then Gaya. Gaya is the last. And then description is how it links to the 3 lokas, okay, mythical realms. So we have done this work based on the textual tradition, mostly the Vayu Purana, and then using modern sophisticated instrument. And you see this is exact circle. It described that the whole cosmos is represented with the 3 sides, and you can draw that. That is a circle. That is the cosmos, Brahmanda. This is the way description is there. So this way the 3 layers, and as you go from outer to inner, you see that that is going to be completely reduced. Subtraction, destruction, subtraction, destruction. This is the way things are going. Now the question was how we can implement it to understand the basis of cultural astronomy. So this way the whole plotting has been done. This is done not one day and one day. This is 7 years work. And then it came in this way. The result to support many of the mythology are decoding some of the mythology and then trying to understand the deeper message of the cultural state. Chitrakoot, which is unique. 2 places are unique in North India, at least. We have not done a lot of work in South India except Hampi. So here is that first description in the Valmiki Ramayana, there is Chitrakoot Prasanga. And that's described that Valmiki is saying that this is just like egg. It is just like golden egg. And then the reference point is given. So simple exercise, taking topographical sheet, plotting those sites, 3 sites, and make just a sketch like egg. And then you start out this geomagnetic survey. See the results right hand side. So Valmiki Ashram is about 22 kilometers away from this site, and from the Gupta Godavari, this is 32 kilometers. How in that time the fellow was describing so accurately. This plant, you can see that this is stone. You go in the same way we have put our microchips, and through the radar system, we have measured all this. The result came like this. Exact circle 4 places, then exact triangle like this. And now comes the whole tradition that people say that first you have to worship Hanuman, then only Ram will meet. That question was asked by my teacher, John Kim Malawil, famous astrophysicist, that there is something there. And that is that how that intensity of the light, that is different scale of gravity, that increases. So you start from the lower, then only you can go to upper. This way, the whole landscape has been measured, experienced, and that has been converted into different form of story. That was the tradition of Chitrakoot. The same thing you can say, this is unique, this is already in the World Heritage list. Kumbh Mela never happened in history. And still it is very difficult to say that this will happen. John Kim Malawil and his team from MIT, Colorado, they have tried to study from the theoretical physics side to how it is going on, what chaos is on. So he said the self-organized scholarship theory of theoretical physics is befitting into this social or cultural landscape. The example you can know that last time it was something like 150 million people attended this. That was recording the history. Never happened. This is nothing like Indian record. American agency, then BBC and several agencies already detailed the report. You can see the Harvard University, this Kumbh Mela project, and you can get that. Now, the second one I cited Chitrakoot, and then you come Khajuraho. Based on a different propaganda, or the study from archaeology, or history of art. So we have gone very minutely particular site. Our approach was different, to take the regional perspective. See the result. This is also same thing, geometric survey based. Here, my cursor you can see that is on the hill, exactly on Shivratri, the 7 years measurement. Exactly the sun rays is going to touch this side. Out of 23, one side is deserted, one is outside, the rest 21 sides, all exactly rays is touching in the morning on the day of Shivratri. So our interpretation is somehow in the ancient past, the sages, they have realized this and they have converted this whole thing in a different code of language. And that became part of the practice, especially tribal groups, they are performing rituals in their own manner. So this is the way. And lower side, you can find a little bit calculation that how we have tried to go decimal to 5 to 6 digit, and every site is measured about 2 to 300 times on different dates and different ways. And we have controlled, get the data from 12 satellites out of 15 total controlling the whole world. Okay, so some of them now you see the same thing you can see in the architectural perspective, and then you try to see this is second level, that you can say the macro, here is a meso level. Now in metaphysical term, 2 or 3 slides more. So this is just like avatar, incarnation of Vishnu. So generally we say these are mythical things, but you can try to see Darwinian, Lamarckian theory like that, Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Narsinga, and Vamana, basic avatar. I'm not talking there. The first time it was mentioned in Satpat Brahma, about 8th century BC text, that is a part of the Rig Veda. And we have published that with all the parallel examples citing from Michael Desi and other people, what they have done in the Western part. And then try to see the 5 gross elements there. So life is started in water, then water to air, that water have to fire, and then comes the total cosmic reality. Same thing, what we call Panchatattva, 5 gross elements. Thanks to the Chinese people, they have also revised now Feng Shui. 4 years ago, that they have changed that idea. The one element they were adding at the place of sky and space, they were talking about metal. Now they say, no, this is exactly the same what Indian sages have done. This is just to add that image of all this. Then concept of Ganga, that is special, and in Indian context, what we call Gangaization of Indian culture. In a different direction, that particular holy river is considered as a replica, a symbol, a representative of the Ganga. For example, Narmada is the Ganga of the West. And this way the Kumbh Mela sites are also linked together. That you can see in art, Mahaballapuram is now art, how Ganga is coming, and you can see in terms of art. Now modern, 1939. Map of India, nowhere in the world. The exactly verticality, horizontality, both having 9.6 dimension, everything is calculated. Now that art is finished, but at least here is the product. This is unique thing. Okay, not in heritage, so many things. Okay, Ganga River, you all know that there are 84 ghats in Varanasi, all representing 8.4 million organic species. Now in 2015, that number has been challenged by the scientists that it is coming at 13.6, not 8.4. But before that, they said that were only 9 million, so that was close to Indian metaphysical expression. So different types of hills, so rivers, how they are part of the different things based on the, again, classical text and tradition, and they became part of the Indian tradition. This is another example. And thanks to International Union of Conservation of Nature, there is a section, there are 42 divisions in that, one of the sections dealing with the spirituality and landscape. They have highlighted this, that look, India has preserved this thing. We have to get more information and messages so that we can use for conservation and planning of nature and culture together. That report already published from them. So here you all know that 40 sites, heritage sites already inscribed there. This year is still the final meeting has not been held. Anyway, among these 40, there are 9 already active religious sites. So we have tried to do this. That it is nothing like only monument and show. We have 2 layers always. One is, you can say, in a way, only historicity. Other way, so that active something cultural going on there, and they link together. Then only you can say totality. For example, the unique only one temple in the whole world, which started it without any basement, just from the surface started, 216 feet high. 80 tons granite, one block is on the top, Brihadishwar and Thanjavur. Okay. Similarly, you can say the design, etc. Let me quickly now pass on. And now the some of the practical things, how it is going on under the International Union of Conservation of Nature. But they, in similar way, from local knowledge, management, institutional, worldview, and cosmology. On the other hand, they say sacred religious sites. So one side is human world, natural world, spiritual world, control the conscience of mind and other things like this. This is the claim they have. Oh, now we are talking about that the whole sustainability concept started in 1987. We all know that Brundtland report. But in December 2015, you see the 3 pages. So first it was taken as a culture, as something, a pillar, or one of the attributes like in the first A. Then it called, this is the core. And now what is called culture itself as a sustainable development, covering all this. This will be detailed out, discussed by our good friend, Paul Schaeffer. I'm not discussing that one. Let me just pass on. So now 2 things more. That is that how this reconnecting with your culture is going to talk about that. Is a visionary mission of awakening the youth to prepare for the global understanding and environmental conscience, human services, and preserving our cultural heritage in the cosmic frame of nature-culture interfaces. To the quality and deeply rooted education and dialogues, a march repressing interconnectedness between locality and universality. What we have discussed earlier, so how this mission is going to work. Holiness, humanity, wholeness, sublimity. The RWYC attempts to awaken and vision through education, education for life, education through life, and education throughout life. That is the Gandhian perspective. And already in 85, that Ahmedabad Declaration of Education, that was UNESCO project, in which Gandhian thought has already been. At the bank of Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad, the report has been published by Rutledge. So the lady behind that, the Holy Spirit is this, and the man who is the leader, he will talk later on. He will show Shepherd. So this is RWYC with our culture. This is the last message like this. Let us believe culture will save our common heritage. Let every day we work together, also realize together. Let us follow on, proceed on, march on the sacred path. Let us join hands, helping universal community to realize. Let us have dream with action, vision, and be into action. Let our emotions be awakened through our inner light. Let our culture be a vital force to feel God in all the life forms. Let this way awaken humanity to meet with sublime divinity. So here comes one side is that Olympia, other side is all. This is the way. So just now completing one note and then finish. So here is again message. All these things when I started and saying that how Nalini Thakur has tried to introduce Indian cultural rights, not cultural rights. That has different sense. So more you can say wide or not clear cut. So it is nothing like cultural landscape of India, but Indian cultural landscape. So message, what our message is today more than ever. This is a national responsibility, it's not individual. It is nothing like ours, the whole nation, beyond obligation to comply with international directive, so as to ensure protection of our identity through culture, and that will be service to Indian culture. I will talk you as a whole that manifesting culture is a latest book that is World as a Culture, released on 26th of March, his own birthday. That book was released, and he will talk about that one. Very similar idea. And he has cited several things very close to that. So this is the way the world is coming close to understand that. Our focus is that we have to put our Indian concept. There is a root, the longest root we have to highlight. He has used the word manifesting culture as the cosmic whole. Okay. Okay, so Indian light escape what to do, think cosmically, see globally, behave regionally, and act locally, but insightfully. This is the message. And now let me close like this with Swami Vivekananda, who has tried in the 5th lecture at Chicago, what he tried to say, citing from Kathopanishad. Rise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. So the concept of Indian cultural landscape started in 2011. Cultural landscape of India, that is different. But frame of that one would only Thakur used to say just after 11 years, then Amita Sinha little bit. And then now we are talking here after 2 years of that debate and coming to close. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. That is confirmation. And then Sri Aurobindo, ultimately, if nothing in all the universes frail as man, nothing likewise is so divine as he. So what to say? The last message is like this. All the problems of human understanding and transformation generate from the mind. Therefore, solution will also come from the mind. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rana. That was a very elaborate, I would say, journey through the cosmic microcosm. I would believe it to be. And
Micro, meso, and macro. We always believe
it's
in
an oxymoron, cosmic and microcosm, but but that's what it seemed like. And I do have some questions coming in my mind, which I, as a participant, would like to ask you, and the other panelists when the time comes. But now thank you so much, Dr. Singh. So now may I request Dr. Sanjib Borkakoti. He's our second speaker of the day. And Dr. Sanjib Kumar Borkakoti is an author and academician, and he has carried out extensive research on Assamese hagiographies and different aspects of the Sanskrit culture. He has authored about 60 books, including one on Majuli, translated scriptures and literary works, and he has edited 3 medieval hagiographies. He has written research-based biography of both Srimanta Sankaradeva and Madhava Deva in English and Assamese. His research works on Satriya dance was instrumental in this dance form getting national recognition. He has received Sankari Sahitya Sanskriti Award from Jorhat Sahitya Sabha for his work on literature and culture. He has also led many social organizations of Assam, like Kalang Korea Alochana Chakra, Assam Institute of Development Studies, and etc. He is an executive member of Majuli Cultural Landscape Management Authority. He is the president of Society for Srimanta Sankaradeva, a global organization for spreading Srimanta Sankaradeva's ideology. He has been a visiting professor of Mahapurusha Srimanta Sankaradeva Vishwavidyalaya. He is also an expert member of International Committee of Intangible Cultural Heritage at ICOMOS International. He's also a member of Delphic International Council, which promotes art and culture globally. Welcome, Dr. Borkakoti. The stage is over to you.
Thank you, Subru. Today, I'll be talking about culture as an integrating factor because it is important for heritages. UNESCO defines culture as a set of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features of society or a social group, and it encompasses, in addition to art and literature, also lifestyles, ways of living together, values, traditions, and beliefs. This was what UNESCO said in the Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity. It refers not only to the creative diversity embodied in particular cultures with their unique traditions and tangible and intangible expressions, but also refers to the creative impulse that lies at the heart of that diversity of cultures. Thus, it can be compared to the Indian concept of Brahma, being present everywhere and at the same time inside everything, as explained in the spiritual treatise Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Thus, culture is not only the identity of a people, but it can also bring people together as it can be embedded in multitude. It can be a bridge between people, When interaction among different people take place, it becomes interaction among cultures. Cultures are not fixed or static entities. Dialogue between cultures take place, and in the process, something beautiful may emerge. I want to examine that process in the context of the Indian state Assam and what sort of outcome happened here in Assam due to that interaction. Assam as a whole has never been like the unitary European nations. Assam is a multi-ethnic conglomerate. Hence, it was and is even now difficult to define the Assamese community. The concept of nation state as in Europe does not apply here. Numerous nation states existed in the Brahmaputra Valley in the medieval period. It always comprised of several kingdoms ruled over by different ethnic groups. These were kingdoms of the Ahoms, the Kos, the Sutia, the Kasari, the Bhuya, and so on. Each of these was a nation state, and they were at loggerheads. The Ahom king Sukafa was the founder state of the nation state, which was initially lived in by the Ahoms and two other tribes, the Barahis and the Morans, who had submitted to the prowess of the Ahoms in the 13th century. Sukafa did not rule over the composite Assamese community. The composite Assamese community had not come into being till that time. But by the time the 6th century old Ahom dynasty, in fact the longest dynasty in India, ended in the 19th century, the Assamese community emerged with a strong identity. The tribes like Mishing, Rava, Moran, Tiwa, Bodo, Kasari, Deuri, Sonoal, Karbi, etc. merged in that Assamese community in spite of maintaining their own individual identity. It has been a great anthropological experiment, perhaps unique in the world. The great polymath Srimanta Shankardeva, who lived in the Brahmaputra Valley from 1449 to 1568, was the man who brought the composite Assamese community into being with his cultural revolution in the 15th century. He created the composite Assamese culture with ingredients from all ethnic groups from within the geographical boundary of the Brahmaputra Valley. Culture builds bridge among people. Srimanta Shankardeva was a great builder of such bridge. Not only that, he built the bridge with ethnic components. The ethnic groups not only traveled along the bridge, but also accepted the bridge itself as their own. The most important innovatory contribution of Srimanta Shankardeva and a major component of his cultural bridge was the institution named Kirtan Ghar or Namghar, which was primarily designed as the worshipping hall of his new religious order named Ekasarana Namadharma. It was largely derived from the Muranghar of the Mishing tribe. The Kirtanghar is as multifaceted as the Muranghar. Not only religious activity, but also cultural, social, and legal activities take place inside the Kirtanghar. Of course, there were several changes made into it. While the Muranghar was constructed on a wooden platform, the Kitanghar was constructed on the ground. Moreover, the military aspect of a Muranghar was removed while conceptualizing the Kitanghar. Even the size of the two houses were similar. The construction of Kitanghar or Namghar is also unique. It was made with indigenous elements like bamboo, thatch, etc., in an eco-friendly manner. It was a central unit inside the residential institution called Than, which later came to be known as a Satra, created by Srimanta Shankardeva. Kitanghar is the most important contribution of the great polymath Srimanta Shankardeva to the society. It functions as both prayer hall and community hall. Even items like they are performed inside it. In fact, Srimanta Shankardeva was the creator of the first play in all modern Indian languages, which is Ankiya plays, the first of which was enacted in 1468. Social litigations are also solved by the villagers in an assembly within this Kitanghar. Little wonder, Kitanghar or Namghar became an indispensable part of every village where Ekasarana Namdharma took root. The multidimensional role of this institution has played an important role in elevating the standard of socio-cultural lives in the Brahmaputra Valley. Apart from the multidimensional function of the Namghar, its architecture is also quite distinctive, which signifies its innovative nature. In no other prayer hall in the Sanatan religion, as you know, the so-called Hindu religion is actually a, a Sanatan religion. One sees the openness like in Namghar. It is not made of stone like the temples in the rest of India. The altar inside the prayer hall, known as Guru Asana, with its conical shape signifying evolution, speaks a volume about the creativity of Srimanta Shankardeva and his followers. So there are a lot of metaphors. The inexpensive nature of Namghar construction made it possible to dispense with the traditional necessity to rely on the royalty for construction of the prayer house. Consequently, the order could have its autonomy. The Assamese culture also could develop at a strong pace without requiring any royal support like elsewhere in India. The management style of Than or Satra also was unique, with decentralization in every step. Srimanta Shankardeva was an expert in team management, which was reflected in his unanimous acceptance even by the adversaries. The type of decentralized leadership management he evolved for Than or Satra has enabled it to survive over the centuries. Even now in Assam, there are about 800 Satras. While team management could have been inherited from the forefathers, the decentralized leadership management was certainly a new concept. Nothing was centralized in Than or Satra, which popularized the newly created order. Feedback was taken from all the devotees, on the basis of which decisions were taken. There were also different layers of leaders, always ready to take over the mantle from the upper echelon. That was the genesis of democracy, eventually given shape by Madhavdev in the management of Barpeta Than, situated in the Barpeta district of Assam. It was certainly a great innovation. The Than or Satra thus became a path-breaking, innovative institution of the second millennium. The notable thing is that its central unit, Namghar, it is itself a full-fledged institution, which is found in all the villages of Brahmaputra Valley. The purview of these institutions went beyond that of the kibbutz of Israel or commune of China, since it covered education, art, culture, religion, and even maintenance of social order. In fact, it covers almost all the societal aspects except the military aspect. No wonder it still survives. A major characteristic of Srimanta Shankardeva's order, which was a new development in the annals of religion, is the introduction of the Keolia devotees, who remain celibate for life and live in the premises of Thans and Satras. These Keolia devotees dedicate their lives to the preservation and promotion of Srimanta Shankardeva's legacy. Many scholars loosely translate the word Keolia as ascetic or monk, but that does not convey the features of this type of devotees. The English words ascetic or monk means a sannyasin, which is an age-old system in the Sanatan religion. The Keolia devotees are engaged in farming works, unlike the sannyasin who live by begging. The Keolia devotees are expert in cultural activities, and they're required to learn songs, dances, drama, crafts, etc., in addition to their religious learning. Nowhere in the world the ascetic or monks perform such cultural activities. It is due to the dedicated Keolia devotees in the Thans and Satras that the components of Sankari culture have survived over the centuries. They train up other Keolia devotees generation after generation in different cultural activities, thus ensuring its continuity. Even in the 21st century, families are offering their sons to the Satras to be trained up as Keolia devotees. The sustained impact of the psyche of people over the centuries is a unique phenomenon. The Thai Ahom community of Assam contributed many important elements to the composite Assamese culture created by Shankardeva. The main pillar of the Kirtanghar is known as Laikhuta, which is a Thai Ahom word. It means the main pillar. The hymns sung as prayer in the Nam Prasanga session in the Ekasarana Nam Dharma has many tunes taken from the Thai Ahom tradition. The sculpture of the flying lion affixed in the altar of the Kirtanghar was derived from the Mongolian sculpture of dragon. The followers of this order continued with this practice of picking good things from the ethnic groups. In fact, the practice of writing hagiographies of Srimanta Shankardeva and his disciples was derived from the Ahom habit of writing history. Even the word Than itself, which is used for denoting the residential campus in the Ekasarana Namadharma, is found in the Ahom chronicle, Satsari Assam Buranji. The costumes of the Sankari dance use and the actors of his Ankya plays were derived to a great extent from the dresses of the Tiwa tribe also. The tune of the Lali Hilali songs of the Tiwa tribe were incorporated in the Nam Prasanga as well as the classical Borgit composed by Sankardeva and his disciple Madhavdev. These Borgit songs are one of the main modes of conveying the principles of the order. The popular instrument, a nagara, a drum, used in the community prayer sessions is also a contribution of the Tiwa people. Another Tiwa instrument, a ludang kram, is very much akin to khol, a drum innovated by Sankardeva. It is pertinent that Kachari tribe also had an ancient tradition of playing dhol or drum. The ghori worn by the Sutradhar, the compare of the Ankya plays of Srimanta Sankardeva, was taken from the white jama worn by the Rabha tribe. The jacket worn by him was derived from the Khangali Faga of the Tiwas. The half-moon shaped entry of the dance used in the Sankari dance or Satya dance, both mean the same, is a trait probably taken from them. The Boros, the Dimasas, and the Missings also have this trait. The Missing people have contributed many things to the Sankari culture. The bracelet known as Kam, worn by the Sutradhar, came from them. The Haire hand posture, that is the hand posture called Haire in the Satya dance, was derived from the Missing dance. The Gayanvan tradition is a great component of the Ankya plays. It was derived from the Sunwal Kosari tribes. The headgear of the Sutradhar is similar to that of the Jaintia tribe. It was worn by other tribes also because such a headgear is seen in a 13th century sculpture of Mahisha demon found in Tinshukia. This headgear traveled to outside the Brahmaputra Valley. The Mughal emperors adopted it. Whence it came back again to the valley with a new name, Mughlai Topi, but it is actually a purely indigenous heritage. The Boro tribe contributed some postures to the Satya dance from their Bagrumba dance. The combination of left hand and right foot and right hand and left foot is one such trait. Some other hand and feet postures of Bagrumba are also similar to the Satya dance. Srimanta Sankardeva used the string instrument Sarengda of the Boro tribe. It was appropriate for singing the Borgit songs. It may be mentioned that the instruments used in the rest of the country are conspicuously absent in Borgit or other Sankari songs. It was all ethnic instruments. Bihu Dance, a common harvest dance of the Assamese people, originally introduced by the Sutya tribe, influenced the Sutradhar dance as well as the battle dances of the Satya dance. Other such ancient heritages influencing this classical dance form are Ojapali, Devdasi dance, Putala Nas, etc. The costume of the Oja or the leader in the Ojapali dance is similar to that of Sutradhar to a great extent. The very word Sutradhar means the holder of strings. That is the string controller of the Putala Nach. The masks used by the actors in the Angkya plays were taken from pure indigenous sources. The Khamtis, the Bhotias, and many other tribes have been using masks. The Bhotal was taken from the Bhotias. That was why it was earlier known as Bhotal. Srimanta Shankardeva was a pioneer in the field of education also. Adult education and non-formal education were two major elements embedded in his plays and hymns. All his literary works had the contemporary curriculum of the residential school as content. The architecture of Kirtanghar was also made to suit his purpose. It was kept open on three sides. Whenever an Angkya play was enacted or a hymn sung inside the open Kirtanghar, the entire populace, including the elderly population, got to hear and thereby learn those things. That was how people learned to be wise, even though they did not earn any formal educational degree. Thus, the Thana Satra became an educational institution also. In this context, Majuli, the river island amidst Brahmaputra, which has been in the tentative list of UNESCO since 2004, assumes spatial importance. The Sankari culture can be found in its pristine form in this river island because of its geographical isolation. The Vaishnavite culture developed by Srimanta Shankardeva and his followers remain in predominant form in Majuli. The saint came to this island in 1522 and established a satra at Tuahata Beluguri. However, at the time Majuli was not an island as it was then joined to the south bank of Brahmaputra. It was severed from the south bank by a severe flood in 1691. Thereafter, it became isolated from the mainland of the Brahmaputra Valley. Because of that, the followers of the Ekasarana Namdharma considered it as a safe place to stay in, since royal persecution was commonplace during the medieval era. Majuli was therefore a safe place where the Ekasarana Namdharma could flourish with all its cultural heritages. Over time, many satras came up in Majuli. At one time, there were as many as 64 satras. Now, almost half of them, that is 31 satras, have survived. All these satras depict unique cultural elements like the classical dance, music, etc., innovated by Srimanta Shankardeva, in addition to maintaining the social structure introduced by him among the society of the devotees. The Satriya dance is now one of the 8 classical dance forms in India. Majuli has preserved the original form of this dance form over the centuries. Majuli has become what it is today only because of the overwhelming presence of the Sankari culture in its socio-cultural life. The management pattern evolved by Srimanta Shankardeva has been maintained by some of the satras. These intangible cultural heritages have strengthened the case of Majuli as a potential World Heritage Site in the cultural landscape category. We have discussed the integrating role of culture, Assam being the most beautiful example of it. Any nation or community identifies itself with its culture. Hence, conflict among nations or communities is nothing but clash of cultures. In this age of conflicts, Assam can therefore be a global model for peace and harmony, going in the footsteps of the great social reformer, Srimanta Shankardeva. The entire Northeast India is such a beautiful conglomerate. Even UNESCO says that respect for the diversity of cultures, tolerance, dialogue, and cooperation in a climate of mutual trust and understanding are among the best guarantee of international peace and security. This has been achieved in Northeast India in general and Assam in particular. The ancient Indian concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam theorizes this perspective. While selecting world heritages, UNESCO should take into consideration this perspective. With these words, I conclude. Thank you all for the patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Borkakoti. That was a very interesting and I would say a different perspective from what we saw in the previous presentation, which was on the Kashi cosmic interpretation. And this is a very different part of the country with a very different cultural perspective. So thank you so much for that. May I now introduce our third speaker for the day, Mr. D. Paul Schaffer. Mr. Schaffer has worked in the cultural field for more than 50 years as an author, advisor, educator, and administrator. He was the assistant director of the Ontario Arts Council from 1967 to 1970 and taught arts administration and cultural policy at York University and the University of Toronto. He has undertaken many projects and missions for UNESCO and is the founder and director of the World Culture Project at the moment. He has written many books on the arts, culture, and cultures, including Culture, the Beacon of the Future, Revolution or Renaissance, making the transition from an economic age to a cultural age, The Age of Culture, the Arts, Gateway to a Fulfilling Life and Cultural Age, and most recently, The World as Culture, Cultivation of the Soul to the Cosmic Whole, published in 2022. He lives and works in Markham, Canada. So welcome, Mr. Schaffer. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, I am. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, loud and
Good.
clear. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction this morning. And good morning to everyone, wherever you are in the world. Good afternoon, good evening. It's, I must say, a real pleasure and a privilege for me to be invited to make a presentation at this historic conference. I appreciate this very much, and I would like to thank the previous speakers for their excellent and informative presentations. I'd like to thank also Nalini. We've been in touch for several years now, and we've reconnected more recently. I appreciate that immensely. And my good friend Rana, who I've been working with over the last few years on reconnecting with your culture. And I've learned so much from him and enjoyed so much working with this organization. It's a wonderful organization that's destined, I believe, to make a very valuable contribution to cultural education and reconnecting people with their cultures in the future. I'd like to begin my presentation by talking about this very difficult problem in the world today with respect to what is the whole and what are the parts of the whole. And I don't know where you stand on this particular issue, but I can tell you in my own experience, this question has been a very fundamental part of my journey in life. I've often found that when I've been thinking about things, reading things, researching things, what seems to be always lurking in the background of this kind of activity is, well, what is the whole and what are the parts of the whole? And I would encourage you to just keep that in mind as I go through the presentation I'm going to make this morning. I particularly believe this is the biggest problem in the world today. Given the state of the world and the prospects for the future as we can now visualize and see them, I think it's of critical importance for us and for humanity and for all countries in the world to take the time and provide the research and the thought into what should be the whole and what should be the parts going forward into the future. If we don't get this right, if somehow we fail in this particular area, I think the consequences are going to be very, very severe, and indeed for future generations of people and countries living in the world. We know that there are two, it's a kind of continuum, there are two major problems. I will get to this in a minute when I talk about the world of culture, but it's fine to leave it there for the moment. There's a continuum with respect to the whole. On the one end, of course, we have the harmonious whole, and this is the whole where there's a balance and a symmetry and a beautiful interaction going on between all the parts. And I think regardless of where we come from or where we live in the world, we all think and talk from time to time about how nice it would be in the world if we had this kind of harmonious whole that we could all enjoy. At the other end of the continuum, however, there's the disharmonious whole. And this is when there are stresses, strains, pressures, tensions between the various parts of the whole. And this sometimes leads, as we know, to very severe conflicts between people, groups, and nations. So I hope we'll keep this in mind as I go through my presentation this morning. And I'd like to begin that in this sense, talking about what I have called the economic age, or consistent with the book that I've just written, The World as Economics. I would like to just say a few words about how this age or world was created and developed in the first place, and then make some comments about an assessment of it. Going back in history, we know that the evolution of the economic age, or the world as economics, really started with Adam Smith and his publication, The Wealth of Nations. It was a phenomenal book that had a profound effect on the world and still does in many ways. I would mention in passing that Adam Smith made a great placed a great emphasis on the importance of the parts of the whole, so much so that his argument is really based on focusing more and more attention on the development of the parts of the whole. He felt this was the key to the creation of material and monetary wealth. If each person in the world specialized in a particular production function, a particular part, he pointed out in this book that much more wealth could be created in that way, that if every person concentrated on the whole and generalized on all the parts, which would produce much less material and monetary wealth. And I think this attitude gave a great impetus to the idea that humanity has to learn more and more about the parts of the whole, setting aside for the moment what that whole might be. This was strengthened, I think, in terms of the development of the economic age when David Ricardo came on the scene. Ricardo, as you know, was an economist. he made a great contribution to economics and is really understood as the person who created economics as a discipline, a separate field of study that people could look at and intensify their research and develop their knowledge in. His particular belief, following on the heels of Adam Smith, was that the first priority in the world was economics and the development of economies. He put a much higher priority on that, even over politics. So the role of governments was not really a political one for Ricardo, it was an economic one. That governments, if they are doing their job properly, should put the highest priority on developing economics as a discipline, focusing on development of the economies in the world, and most importantly, securing the benefits from that through the promotion of economic growth. And this leads me to the third individual who had such a powerful effect on the creation and evolution of the economic age, and that was Karl Marx. Now, I've made the claim in many of my writings that there are two dimensions to the work of Karl Marx. We're all very familiar with the contributions he made to the conflict between capitalism and communism and the laboring class and the wealthy capitalistic class. It more or less ruled the world for a century, and so we all know about that side of it. But Marx also, and more importantly in my mind, created the economic interpretation of history. And in that economic interpretation of history, he said that economics was the most important discipline and activity in the world, not only at the time in which he was living, but it always was in the past, and it always would be in the future. I mean, this is the fundamental basis of the economic interpretation of history. So according to Marx, we're always living in an economic age, past, present, and future. So regardless of what we talk about here, if you believe in the economic interpretation of history, it's rather pointless because the future is going to be wrapped around economics and economic growth and development. And what happened here, this was at the tail end really of the 19th century. What happened from here is that the most powerful people and institutions in the world decided that Marx had uncovered a fundamental, eternal, universal truth. And what happened as a result of that is that people lost interest in any other interpretation of historical events. Marx had uncovered this. It was the right way to go. So people gave up on questioning this, thinking about other views of the whole, and slowly but surely, imperceptibly but relentlessly, economics became the whole, and everything else became a part of economics. So you could see why I'm concerned about this question of what's really the whole and what's really the parts. What happened from here, as we know, is as the economic age developed in the 20th century, more flesh was put on the bones and the skeleton of this kind of economic view of the world. And in the 20th century, apart from the two major world wars, most of the focus of attention was developing economics, economies, and economic growth. And I can go from here to say that personally, I don't know whether you'd share this view, but personally, I think this is probably humanity's greatest achievement in history, was the creation development of the economic age. Since the age was created, going back to Adam Smith and up to the present, billions of people over the past period of time, particularly the 20th and beginning of the 21st century, have profited and benefited immensely from the focus of attention, the exclusive focus of attention on goods, services, economic growth, economic development, and material and monetary wealth. It's a phenomenal achievement. I don't think we can doubt that for a moment. But here's the catch. When the economic age was created in the 19th century by Marx and other economists earlier, and many to follow, no consideration whatsoever was given to the impact that the economic age was going to have on the natural environment. I know from my studies of and teaching of economics for a number of years that the view largely was, well, the environment is taken as a given. We can ignore it because it's not really important. It's important in providing humanity with resources, but beyond that, we just treat it as a given because it's there. It's provided by nature. It's not provided by human beings. And what's been the consequence of that? The consequence of ignoring the natural environment, not putting economics in a context, a bigger context, is that we're now facing a crucial period in the history of the world. The economic age on the negative side, we've talked about the strengths, but in terms of the shortcomings, the economic age has pushed us close to disaster. It's had a devastating effect on the natural environment, and day by day, we're really realizing more and more just how devastating that impact is. It's not able to solve the horrendous inequalities and disparities that exist in income and wealth. My studies in economics over a number of years led me to the conclusion that the economic age is really designed for the powerful, the wealthy elites, the superpowers, as we call them today. And built into that is the fact that it creates increasing rather than decreasing inequalities in income and wealth. The rich get rich and the poor get poor. And we're seeing that and have seen that in the world, particularly over the last 50 or 60 years, where we're now talking about 95 to 98% of the world's wealth and resources being controlled by 3% of the population. So that is a problem also for the economic age. The final problem is that what's going on in the world today, of course, is we're having the increasing interaction of peoples and countries with very different worldviews, values, value systems, customs, traditions, ways of life. This also is not going to be solved by the economic age. Remember that the economic age was designed specifically to increase the creation of goods and services and material and monetary wealth. It was not designed to come to grips with the environmental crisis. It was not designed to deal with inequalities in income and wealth. It was not designed to work out more compatible and friendly relations between people and nations and different ethnic groups. So here we are now at the present time with an age that we're all still living in, and being confronted again with this basic problem: what is the whole and what are the parts? And I think we're beginning to realize, as more and more reservations and misgivings and concerns are mounting about the unfavorable impact that economics and economies are having on the world, we're more concerned about we have to find a way in which economics can play a positive rather than negative role in the world. And I think that's going to come not from economics, but from culture. I strongly believe, and I hope that I can make this argument in the latter part of my presentation now. I hope we can move forward with understanding that we need a new idea of the whole. We need a new context for activities like economics and all other activities, a new context. You remember that one of the great cultural scholars in the world, Ruth Benedict, said, context determines contents. If you change the context, you change the contents. So let's talk about this in the next part of my presentation. And this is concerned with giving you an overview of the book that I have just had published, The World as Culture. What I've tried to do in this book is to see the world from a cultural perspective rather than an economic perspective. There's an important place for economics in this broader and more fundamental perspective. But basically, this book is concerned with trying to develop the idea that rather than looking at the world of the future from an economic perspective, which so many of us have been taught and learned to do, let's try and look at the world from a true cultural perspective. Now, in order to make this argument that the cultural perspective has some validity and some real substance going forward into the future, I decided, when I decided to write this book, to have a good hard look at how culture has evolved as an idea and reality over the course of history. And this is basically what the book is all about. What is up on the screen now are the contents of the chapters, except for the first chapter, which is on why a world of culture. And there's a final chapter on realizing the world as culture. But this is the heart of the book, really, because it has to do with the substance of the various chapters. So I've started out, I went back, and of course, if we're talking about culture as a reality, we can probably trace this back to the creation of small groups of humans and almost humans, and when they were living in caves and drawing animals and human beings on the sides and the walls of caves. I mean, this, as we know, was a cultural function, a cultural form of expression. So the reality of culture is very old. Culture as an idea, however, as far as I could find out, although there may be some prerequisites to this, really occurred about 70 years before the birth of Christ, when Marcus Cicero in Italy said, culture is the philosophy or cultivation of the soul. And that, of course, is the chapter 2 in the book. I've divided these up into clusters because they work themselves out through history in the form of clusters. The first cluster really then was Cultivation of the Soul or Philosophy of the Soul by Cicero. It was a great way to start the cultural history and understanding of culture in the world, a marvelous way to start, but it's also standalone. There have been people that have gone into a great deal of depth in looking at the idea that culture is the soul, because it derived from the Latin verb colere, which means to nurture, to cultivate, to respect, encourage. So it's a very interesting idea, but it's kind of a standalone idea in many ways in the history of cultural thought. Although I remind you that Gandhi said, a nation's culture is in the heart and in the soul of its people. So there are evidence throughout history that the soul was very important thinking about culture. The Decline of the West by Oswald Spengler. There's a lot about the soul of the city. When the Americans recently talked about the fight for the soul of the nation in one of their major elections, there was a lot of concern about the soul of nations. But I think in future, we're going to have to revisit this standalone idea of culture and cultivate it and flesh it out much more fully. Following that, there was a cluster of activities that started not much after Cicero's view of culture. This was the development of the arts, humanities, and the heritage of history. And this, as we know, because we're all involved in this particular field, has occupied the world over the last 2,000 years and more. I've clustered it together because these things fit very nicely together in the overall scheme of history and things, the arts, humanities, and the heritage of history. I won't go into any depth on those because we're all very familiar about those and what's included in those. But I would like to say that this is the definition or view that most people, governments, educational institutions, corporations use when they're deciding, for example, in the case of governments or corporations, what organizations do we give money to if we're giving cultural grants? Governments, when they're planning their cultural policies and developments, this is the definition of culture that they usually refer to. Particularly if we add another more recent dimension here at the bottom, as you know, which is the so-called cultural industries that we're all familiar with today and have so much to do with cultural communications and technology. So these areas are well known. Most people, if you ask most people in the world what's culture, it would probably be one of these activities or all of these activities that they'd mention and they'd say, this is what culture is really all about, because this has had all the attention over the last 20 centuries. Okay, so this carries us right up to the present in terms of that particular cluster of activities. The next cluster, and in my mind, it's the cluster that's most important in the cultural history of humanity. And it occurred largely in the latter part of the 19th century. And this cluster involves personality development, the complex whole or total way of life of people, society, social systems, communications, and technology. Personality development. There was a great interest in the idea of the whole person in the latter part of the 19th century. Most of it was developed, as you know, by Matthew Arnold. He wrote at length about the idea of the whole person. And the whole person was the person that developed harmonious relationships between all the various parts. Here we go back to that. And he believed very strongly that if people could develop that kind of harmonious development of the human personality, this is the way to go in the future. And this is why I think in arts education, there's a recognition that arts play a very important role in the development of the whole person. And this has been manifested increasingly in what we now know as psychology and the psychological definition of culture. This next one, the complex whole and total way of life of people, this is our meat. This is really, really, I think, where we should go if we want to understand more fully what the cultural perspective is really all about. And it was Edward Burnett Tyler, in the latter part of the 19th century, who formed this definition: culture is the complex whole. Culture is the whole in the sense that it incorporates everything. Culture is the whole in the sense that it's the container for all the various parts. This is where we get the economics, education, politics, business, commerce, recreation, sports, the arts, they're all there according to Tyler, because it's the total way of life of people. It's a complex whole. And as you know, anthropologists followed up on this in the latter part of the 19th and early part of the 20th centuries, going out to different parts of the world, studying cultures in depth, many of them cultures that were dying and vanishing because they thought, if we don't understand and collect information about them now, we'll lose it for good, so let's concentrate there. But this idea of culture as a whole, it really evolved through the work of anthropologists and was so important. But there was a problem here too. It did prove that culture and cultures, and not economics and economies, were the foundation of societies. Very important aspect of it. When they went into these countries, they didn't follow up on this economic tradition, which was also developing by others in many of the same parts of the world. They said, no, these weren't economics and economies. These were culture and cultures, because they were the whole. They were not one part of the whole like economics. They were the whole. The problem with the anthropology, the two problems with the anthropological definition of culture. The first is that, like the economic age that I was talking about, it focused largely on the strengths of culture as the complex whole. It tended to ignore some of the problems and the details. And this is why this third area has been included: society, social systems, communications, and technology. These were largely developed by sociologists rather than anthropologists. And you may know that there was a big debate between anthropologists and culture and sociologists at one time, because the sociologists, they accepted the idea that culture was the context and that cultures were wholes. But their particular interest was not so much in that as a kind of general universal view. Their interest was in the details. What are the most important parts? How do these important parts interact with each other? How do they impact on the whole? And it was out of this that we began to realize, and terribly importantly for our futures, that there are shortcomings and limitations and problems with culture and making them the basis of the whole or wholes. And that is, we're very familiar with this because of all of the experiences that people in the architectural field, ICOMOS, have been dealing with over the last 100 years, and more so more recently, in the destruction of so many sacred cultural places, of the vanishing of civilizations. So my argument has been from the beginning, we must in the future see culture as a beacon of the future. On the one hand, it can shine light on a viable, valuable, and vital path or course or direction for the future. But on the other hand, definitely, it must warn of impending danger. We're dealing with big issues here and big problems, and big issues and big problems, as we know, have big difficulties. It also raises a lot of very fundamental questions about the shortcomings of culture and how important it is in the future to establish the safeguards and the precautions to ensure that we minimize the costs. Let's not make the same mistake we made with the economic age and ignore this area. Let's be sure that we set in place the precautions to ensure that the negative aspects of culture are minimalized, and we focus our attention also on the activities that maximize rather than minimize. Going on then, the next cluster is a single cluster, behavior of the ways of life of other species. As we have seen, there's an enormous amount of going on in research today about the lives and the cultures of other species. I think because of the environment and ecological movements, we've given up on our idea that human beings have dominion over the earth. We're beginning to see that we're one of many species, and some of those species, as we know, outnumber us by billions and billions. When we're talking about plants and animals, for example, we're talking about very important species now. There's so much research going on in biology and other areas, zoology, botany, to understand plants and animals more, to learn more about how they communicate with each other, how they develop over their period of time, the languages that they use to communicate, the way they look after their families, the development of their families, the way they interact with each other and other species. A good example of this, of course, is all the focus and research that's being done on elephants as a species, and how much we as people can learn about elephants from their cultures and how they bring up their young, and how they nurture and look after their young and give them the education that's important for them, and how close together and friendly and loving they are as a species in looking after each other, which we seem to be lacking. So there's so much to learn now from other species, from plants. We're discovering that plants communicate with each other. They have life cycles just like we do. They have languages that they can use to communicate with others. In the book, I mentioned in the book that this is such an important part now, because I think what we're finding in total is that the differences that exist between the human species and animal and plant species is only one of extent and degree, and not in essence or in kind. We're not significantly different from other species. We're very similar to other species in most of our ways. And this brings us, I guess, to the last cluster, which is interactions with the natural environment and mythology, worldview, and cosmology. In terms of interaction with the natural environment, as you know, there's a lot going on in the world today around the idea of an ecological cultural civilization. The Chinese have been very active in this, and I think they've taken it farther than any other country in actually weaving this idea into their political activities and developments. So it's been getting a lot of attention. It's an outgrowth, obviously, of the environmental movement, but a very important one. And then finally, there's mythology, worldview, and cosmology. I think this is where the future directions in the world and for humanity should really come from. I know far, far less about this area than the people that are engaged in this conference. And I defer to Rana, to Nalini, and all the others that were with us today to bring to the fore their enormous insights into the role that cosmology is going to play in the world of the future. I think it's going to be one of the key, along with the anthropological view of culture. I think it's going to be one of the real keys to help us steer this path to the future. And I have a great belief that most of the impetus should come from India. That India is the one country in my mind that has gone far, far further than any other country in the world in coming to grips with a deep and broad understanding of what cosmology is really all about. And particularly now that, we're seeing so many interesting explorations in outer space and going forward into the future, I think we're aware now that the cosmic whole, as we put it, is going to be very much part of cultural development in the future. And I think India should and could lead the world in this particular area and make a valuable contribution in the world. I only have one other comment to make in conclusion on my presentation, and it's this. This is, I think it's important for us to see that from the research that's being done in so many different areas of culture, that culture today is not only being grasped by cultural scholars, cultural historians, cultural practitioners, it's being picked up by governments, it's being picked up by corporations, it's being picked up by people. People are now talking about change the culture. And by that, I think that they really mean the anthropological view of culture, change the way of life. This is happening in organizations. Governments are picking up on this now and talking about culture as the key to systemic change and not just incremental change. So there's an exciting opportunity for us, I believe, going forward into the future to capitalize on the growing interest about culture being the change agent that's going to lead us into the new world and the new reality. And it seems to me that as people working in the cultural field, it's very important for us to play a leadership and proactive role, not only in the developments that are taking place in our own particular area of cultural interest and concern. We all have specific areas within this overall cultural framework and perspective and are doing very valuable work in those areas. But we have to come together. The various cultural groups and communities have to come together in the future, the way the environmental movement came together, in order to make the collective case that culture is the way to go in the future, and that culture and cultures are the foundation and essence of existence and life on this planet, and the key to solving some of the major problems that we're confronted with today and going forward into the future. Thank you very much for your kind opportunity to let me speak about my concern for the role of culture and what my latest book on the world of culture is all about. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to do this, and I think India just has such an important role to play going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schaffer. Thank you for presenting the international perspective on culture. So today, that's all from the speakers today. So today we had 3 speakers talking about 3 different things bound together by the focus on cultural perspective towards heritage. And I think a lot lies on the professionals to really figure out how to utilize or, adopt this approach for heritage protection. So any questions? Now we have the next few minutes for discussion and question and answer. So any questions? We have not received any questions in the chat yet, but if anybody would like to ask, they can either raise their hand or type in the chat box. Any opinions to share on this topic from any of the participants? There is a question from Ms. Mona Lisa Bhardwaj. So how can India lead in this new approach? It's not specific to any speaker, so anyone may have a go at it.
Might I ask if Rana could, I'm sure he has views about the importance of this and how it might be capitalized on going forward. Rana, could you speak to that?
I think he may not be available at the moment.
Okay.
Would you, Mr. Borkakoti, Nalini ma'am, what about you? Any views on the presentations?
Do you want me to give my views? Actually, Mona Lisa must have addressed Paul only, because he was giving a new approach, bringing into consideration the economic factor. And nowadays, everything revolves around the economy. So that is a given truth. But what I think that should happen is that culture should have a greater say, and especially its integrating role. So what the European approach in deciding about heritage, it is not convenient for India and the third world countries, as Professor Thakur said at the outset. So we think there should be a hard search in UNESCO in their basic perspective. And our Indian approach of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam should be the main approach, not individualistic perspective with trust on the economy.
Mhm.
That's what I think.
If I could just add a point to that. When I was talking about the cluster that involves the arts, humanities, and heritage of history, the interesting thing to me is that in the economic age, as we know in most parts of the world, those three areas were valued largely for their economic capabilities and benefits. And in terms of the way in which they were approached by governments, certainly in the Western world, I'm not so sure about other parts of the world, but in the Western world, eventually they were seen, in keeping with the economic age, as activities that could generate economic growth. And they were called on for that, and particularly the cultural industries and the World Heritage sites, which were very much linked to tourism. And I know that from an economic perspective, there was much to be gained in all parts of the world from the tourism that was generated by architectural, artistic, and different kinds of sites. I make this point because I think if you look at the world from a cultural perspective rather than an economic perspective going forward, those three areas, the arts, humanities, and heritage of history and the cultural industries, they become the gateways that are required to open up understandings and research and insight into this broader notion of culture as a whole. And I think this is particularly true of architecture. Architecture, it provides tremendous cultural symbols in opening up understandings of this bigger dimension of culture as the complex whole. So this is going to be a very important area in the future, obviously, using the arts, the humanities, and heritage of history to open the doors on this, the more anthropological and cosmological conceptions of culture. So that their raison d'etre has to be changed in the future. And I think it's up to governments and organizations like UNESCO and United Nations to play a major role in that. And hopefully that will be a subject for discussion at the Mondi Occult conference in Mexico City at the end of September.
Dr. Rana Singh has some, so you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, unfortunately, then again, my half computer failed. So I have to make my voice, it is audible?
Yes.
Okay. So let me say one thing that several times we became very emotional and talking about the ancient text. I am citing one example. Now, very commonly cited, people say, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is a family. We have to behave like this. But if you can read the real text, Maha Upanishad, that is the 3rd and 11th mantra, then they have given the answer of so many things we are talking. That is the half the portion we are citing, just like politicians everywhere say, we follow Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Sorry to say, the first phase of that mantra is different. Udara Charita Nam Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. If your mind is open, if you open your heart, if you open your feeling, then only the whole world is a family. So already that answer is given first, but we cite half and then we say this is the mantra. So that is an important question, what Arvinda or Vivekananda said, that we have to think from ourselves, not only preaching them. And there are several examples all over the world. People are practicing and doing this. So the main problem, what is coming up, how to practically do it. Theoretically, okay, very good. We are interpreting, trying to convince. And then one question here was that how people think and how they will do. So that is still the question we have to think over that how to do this. And in no way we can negate now this economic world, what Paul is saying. So we have to put what type of energy, thought that can solve the issue. You go in the interior area, where I usually go, still people are hungry and dying and nobody is going to take care. Where is that culture? So one side you talk something this, then there is something very crucial point. So I am just saying my feeling that it is nothing like question, just information. That is the other side of the reality. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Singh. Before we move forward, I would like to introduce Dr. Nalini. She is part of the working group and she is the coordinator of the National Scientific Committee on Intangible Cultural Heritage, the 3rd NSC, which is the organizing committee for today's event. And Dr. Atre is also going to be, supervising the discussion. So welcome, Dr. Atre. Would you like to add anything before we take any of the other questions after this?
Me, Shubhra?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. No, I think we can go to the summary. If there's any question from the participant, we can take that.
There is a direct question to Dr. Sanjib Borkakoti. What do you think we can do more looking at underrepresented heritage from Northeast India?
Actually, Northeast is full of potential areas, sites, and potential intangible cultural heritages. We ICOMOS have taken up this, but ultimately the government have to submit the proposals. That is the problem. Until and unless the government submit their proposals through proper channel, we, the people in ICOMOS, cannot do much. We can only create awareness, but after all, the government have to be involved.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Rana Singh?
Just I have to add one point, that very frequently you always say that we have to prepare this report and go for inscription and then do like this. Always we say like this. My own experience in Japan, they have already started heritage law in 1919. Okay, they have 3 levels. Here in international, when you talk UNESCO, then they have provincial, then they have a smaller level. Okay, 3 levels. And the 2 levels up to even national level, all controlled by the public. Then government is a supporting body, not the controlling body. Here the problem is everything we say like this. So 2 things are here. To what extent we are responsible for that? Means community, NGOs, or whatever local organizations, what we are doing. how to make that link, how to make support, what to do. Like case of Majuli. Internationally, several papers written, well known, but what is the gap that it is not coming up? And why to coming up from the UNESCO? That is another big deal. I have some discussion with, I am not going to cite the name of the senior fellows and directors in UNESCO. And then one personal level, the question there is, what you are doing for that? Why you ask us to do? Why you want to just pay at international? You can make that, other people can. So it is something like other side of the debate also to be, to a certain extent, something we have to think over that. What to do? Why you only talk inscription of this? Now let us something very bad story related to the UNESCO inscription gone. Now the Indian image had fallen down. That story inside I am not going to tell. That here and there political, then put something here, oh, this is my state, this is that state, and then you push, and now out of 4, bye-bye to everything. So something we have to think from our own side. Just like several examples from Majuli. So many potentials here and there. So why not to local level come up? This is just idea, theoretical idea. I am not saying question, no question. It is just my feeling like this. I have worked in Sirakawago, and also I have worked in Gimhae in Korea. And there I found they are not worried about this government business and all that. All the local people, you go to Gimhae, very small area. We always say that from 9th century, people gone here and Buddhism gone here. My goodness, 1st century, date is exact 4-8 in Korea, Gimhae, all those proof are there. They have made their own Gimhae society. Now Ayodhya is considered to their forefathers' land. Mata Ji ka ghar, they have remembered this word, Mata Ji ka ghar. What is that, Ayodhya? Who is doing that? All the local people. And now they have counted about 50,000 people that linked to that Ayodhya. Year started 4-8. What in history you say that in late 9th century? So this is the wonderful example we have. The same thing in Shirakawago, the most visited site in Japan. It is all maintained by the people themselves. So something we talk a lot. So something I think our friend who is the mastermind and part of Majuli gives some special spirit that we can go and settle there and do something for Majuli.
There are many problems. Like in the last time when the dossier was sent, 6 pages were found torn. So problems are there in ASI.
So we have to believe in something positive thought. That's all. And our duty is to always work, not to think negative. Negative is a process of all development. Time will come, people will recognize. Now Majuli is at least during the last 10 years, 100 of places all over the world, Majuli, they are talking now. So at least this has been realized now. Unique island with unique culture developed there. So next time we have the seminar, what Nalini ji said, that should be that not this online, but Majuli itself. What do you think? And then the task will be given to all the participants. You have to do something good in the island Majuli. That I wish like that. Okay, thank you.
If I could just add something here, one of the things I find very fascinating that's going on in the world today, there's been a lot of talk in the media and in political institutions about the shift that seems to be taking place from elite culture to popular culture and elitism to populism. And I'd be very interested in the experiences in India, but I could say in the case of Canada, that one of the most exciting aspects of the growth of populism in Canada and in other parts of the world is that at the present time, more and more opportunities are being opened up in Canada through government programs and policies, especially through the media, newspapers, community radios, community television stations, and they're providing opportunities. And some of these opportunities are the result of the severe treatment that our Indigenous peoples experienced in the past. And Canada, as you know, at present is in the process of trying to create more opportunities and apologize for the severe damage that's been done to the Indigenous people. So there are more opportunities opening up for them. But at the same time, there are a lot more opportunities opening up for the Black population in Canada. And this results, I think, from pressure coming from the Black Lives Movement in the States and by groups in Canada that have been treated very badly and unjustly historically, and want to see this situation changed and are now pressuring governments for this change. But the same thing is also true for a lot of marginalized and oppressed minorities and groups in Canada. And I pick up the paper today, it's amazing to see how many opportunities in terms of jobs, opportunities to communicate, opportunities to tell their stories, their experiences are opening up. So what we're finding as a result of this is that there's a lot more activity that's coming up from the ground on up and less coming from the top down. And I think that's a pretty major development in Canada. If it is in other parts of the world too, and I believe it is in some, I'm not so sure about others, then there's an opportunity here, I think, that we could capitalize on in the future to say that culture is bringing these people together and proving useful in terms of making connections, integrating these different groups into the society and providing them with opportunities as well. Personally, I'm very optimistic about that development in the future.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? There was a question which Dr. Borkakoti has replied to, but I would like to read about it, that we talk about culture, religion, cultural landscapes, etc. But how can a common man feel associated with it? As in most cases, the perspective of common man is different with regards to heritage. How can a common man feel connected, and look from heritage perspective? Although, if I may pitch into this, I think that, these definitions are created from a professional's or a working person's perspective. The culture is essentially defined by the common man. So we are not, it's not something for them to understand. I think it's for us to interpret and really, then understand how do we go about doing our jobs without really affecting their association with the same resources. I'm sorry, the stage is open if anybody would like to respond to the question. It's a general question, and I would assume that now the floor is open. I would urge the participants, the listeners also to pitch in with their views on this, not just the speakers. So if there's anyone else interested in saying something on the topic, feels that something has been left out, there is a fresh perspective, something new, kindly feel free also to respond to the questions that are being put up in the chat box. Vidisha Barwal has raised.
Hello, good evening. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, everyone. I would first like to thank everyone, all the speakers and the ICOMOS fraternity for this great session. I'm new to ICOMOS, so this is my first session, and must I say that it was a great learning listening to all the speakers. So I'm extremely thankful to everyone. I have a few points that I wanted to discuss, and these are largely related to a field that I have been working for past approximately 1.5 years or 2 years now. My name is Vidisha Barwal, and professionally I'm a landscape architect. And I was, though I belong to Himachal Pradesh, a Himalayan state of India, but I was working in Meghalaya, a state in the Northeast, in the Living Root Bridges project. So there is this project on Living Root Bridges that is going on in the state of Meghalaya. And I do not know if everyone is aware of the living root bridges who are present in this session, but it's the bridges that have been that have come into picture because of the engagement of the tribes that have been living in those subtropical forests. And they are the bridges that are made by the roots of the ficus species, primarily by the roots of the ficus species. And that's where we were working, and we've been wanting to push those sites towards conservation, specifically from the header of cultural landscapes. So our approach has been that the people who are belonging to the tribes of Khasi, Jaintia, we've been wanting to, so the initiation was through a series of dialogues and repeated dialogues with the community. And it took a lot of time to, through dialogues, generate that sense of trust between the community and us who are wanting to know them, who are wanting to know how they live, how they've interacted with their own surroundings. And once that trust started to begin it started to build up, the communities really became friends with us. And we eventually landed up by creating cooperatives. Usually cooperatives are meant for, either it's trade or some product or something. But the idea behind the initiation of the cooperatives was conservation. Conservation of the sites where living root bridges lie. And so that those cooperatives are framed by the people in the villages themselves. So that tomorrow, if we are questioned about the protection and management of those sites, it's not us as an external body or some agency or something, but the stakeholders, the people who really belong to that land are the real stewards and the protectors, because they are the ones who are in real-time engagement with their environment. So this approach, I would just like to, just like Professor Rana sir was just saying that, it's the people who are taking if the people who are belonging to the region take the lead, that could be a very strong factor in protecting something which is called as a heritage or a cultural practice. So I hope, and we hope as a team, that the work that we are trying to do in Meghalaya, it comes out through that sense, because we are trying our best that the decision, the understanding, it comes from the people first who are living in that landscape. And we are seeing the bridges to be something which are, because the bridges are intergenerational, and we are taking into note the amount of time, on the part of humans that must have taken for those bridges to come as a manifestation of their perpetual engagement with the surroundings. So it's also about how people from those tribes have lived in that area since centuries, and how much have they been able to engage with other constituents of the environment they've been living in apart from humans. So it's just not a sense of deep engagement with humans, but the non-human constituents of their environment as well, which together would, I think, equally frame as how culture comes up. So could we see culture as, something which is coming out as a long-driven, real-time, perpetual engagement of us as humans with the components that are equally present in our surroundings? Like, instead of mostly in the urban, as an architect, we are seeing this, that the common man is seeing nature as something which is standing outside the box of nature and then looking at it, not seeing ourselves as part of that thing itself. So nature as a term is coming out to be something which is separate from human. Instead, when the human starts seeing himself inside the nature, it becomes more like an environment that I'm within, rather than seeing it from outside. So that is the perspective that we are trying to take. That is our starting point when we are writing for the people who are engaged with the living root bridges in the landscapes in Meghalaya. And I would just like your thoughts, the thoughts from the fraternity who have spoken here, if they could guide us on this, or what are their thoughts on the approach that we are going. And I hope that it makes sense that what we are trying to do, because we are wanting to engage people and we are wanting to give this back to people, because that's where the true power would lie for the project to go on, and for the conservation of this practice that they've been involved in since generations now, because the bridges take 200 years, 300 years to really become what they are. And that must have started with an extreme sense of perceptual awareness, and that perceptual awareness must have evolved over time and must have got more honed over time with the more those people from the tribe must have interacted within their environment. Only that would allow them to become aware of the properties of roots of a tree, properties of the texture of the backside of a leaf that they use to clean the floors. So we are trying to look into those. Small nuances that we are observing when we are interacting with the villagers. And it's really a very deep learning for us. And we are thinking that it's of utmost importance if tomorrow we want to pitch in this under the header of cultural landscapes for UNESCO. So, yeah.
So any response to that?
That's it. About that root bridge, while the ingredient is natural, that is the root of the tree, it came into being through the intervention of people only. They arranged the roots in such a manner that it took the shape of a bridge. So it is what Professor Rana said, that is imprint of people on nature. So it comes in the cultural landscape category, and but it has become a bit brittle with time. It's already 2 centuries old. Perhaps the local people will have their traditional knowledge about how to strengthen it and how to keep new layers added to it. So their traditional knowledge will be of much importance in this case.
Okay, so I think I'll request Dr. Nalini to now summarize and recapitulate the key points of the discussion held today.
Thank you, Shubhru. Good evening, everyone. So I start with the congratulations that we are celebrating 76th Independence Year, and we are in the 75 years of our independence. We are celebrating 50 years of World Heritage Convention 1972, and as Naveen told, we are also celebrating 10 years of ICOMOS. So when we are in midst of celebrations, the celebrations is also a time to introspect at what we have gained treading a particular direction, and also question ourselves now that which direction we need to move further, or we need to tread the same path, as it is our duty to give a better future to the coming generations. And as heritage professionals, we have more responsibility of what kind of heritage, how much of it, and in what shape we hand it over to our successive generations. The present webinar series, curated by NSC Theophil as a lead team with NSC ICH, NSC Cultural Landscape, and Northeast Zone as the major collaborators, comes at a perfect time that we need to introspect our achievements, our shortcomings, and the gaps which have emerged in the last 70 years in the field of heritage studies and conservation. The first of this series, this webinar, is intended to be a basic foundational program to define the philosophical base for conservation. It is an attempt to define and explain the outlook to the exterior world from the cultural perspective. Basically, as Professor Nalini says, it is an attempt at holistic worldview. The seminar started where Dr. Naveen initiated the discussion with the proposition that our approaches need to be redefined at this juncture, when India is 75-year-old, World Heritage Convention at 50, and ICOMOS India at 10 years. And this was beautifully delineated by Professor Nalini in her introduction, where she acquainted the participants with aims and objectives of the program, how the subject needs to be treated, that is how to approach conservation with cultural perspectives, holistic Indian approach, to focus on wealth of nature, ecology, culture, holistic approach, which actually belongs to a different system, and the need to develop it. She also emphasized that Indian heritage is a different system and needs different research and action. Similarly, knowledge and management of heritage also needs to be explored. She also vouched for interdisciplinary approach. The discussion by the invited experts centered around culture, its meaning and connotations at micro, and macro level. To begin with, Professor Rana, he focused on Indian cultural landscape as a way of understanding and connecting with each other. He delved on the nature-culture journey, which has always been the essence of Indian tradition. He emphasized on the macro to micro approach to be adopted in the understanding of the built heritage of Kashi. Through the examples of Ayodhya, Gaya, and Chitrakoot, he showed how that nature-culture interplay has been a part of constant and continuous evolutionary drama between earthly man and cosmic nature, turns into various built structures and traditions that maintained continuity, maintenance, transformation, and changes and transmission to the future generations. Dr. Sanjib looked into the case study of Assam at micro level. We all know that Assam is a place where we have numerous ethnic groups with their own distinct cultures. And he emphasized that how the culture of Shankradev created a cultural bridge among all these ethnic groups, reinforcing that culture is a great integrating factor here. And he put up the case that this micro model can be a global model. Paul Schoffer put forth the perspective of world as a culture. What is whole? What are the parts of the whole? World as a culture, as a continuum whole, which is harmonious, balance, symmetry of all parts. Other end is disharmony, stresses, strains, tensions, conflicts in parts. He emphasized that culture and cultures in holistic sense and not economics and economies in partial sense are the real foundation of human existence. He presents culture as a change agent to meet the problems being faced by the humanity in present times. We learned a lot from these presentations, and this makes us think that where do we go from here? What are the areas which we need to look at in the coming webinars? And it is high time that we question the received wisdom of what is heritage, energize heritage studies by drawing on wider intellectual sources from within India, vigorously question the conservative, cultural, and economic power relations that outdated understanding of culture heritage seems to underpin. World as culture, heritage as integrating factor, responsibility to understand heritage, which leads to protection of the same, needs to be taken up. Also, the active participation of the people and communities who have been marginalized in creation and management of heritage needs to be brought in as active stakeholders. We also need to critically engage with the proposition that heritage studies need to be rebuilt from ground up using Indian tools and paradigms. These tools are not new, but have been part of Indian civilization for ages. The discourse on nature culture is not new for India. It has been part of our tradition as reflected in our festivals and rituals. In fact, it is a way of life. Take a look at any ritual, any festival. They are representative of conservation methods, nature culture journey, and sustainable development. But at the same time, we cannot deny that the study of heritage has historically been dominated by Western, predominantly European, by experts in archaeology, history, architecture, and art history. Though there have been progressive currents in these disciplines, yet they sustain a limited idea of what heritage is and how it should be studied and managed. The old way of looking at heritage, the authorized heritage discourse, privileges old, grand, prestigious, expert-approved sites, buildings, and artifacts that sustain Western narratives of nations, class, and science. Then are we satisfied with this way of thinking about our Indian heritage and culture? We know that heritage studies in India also remain dominated by architecture, history, archaeology, and art history experts. So the need of the hour is to move beyond authorized heritage discourse and bring in a dialogue among the scholars which is cross-disciplinary. Heritage needs to be interpreted as a facet of contemporary society through a lens of interpretive critical theory. A new approach to the idea of what heritage is and how it should be studied and managed needs to be adopted as emphasized by Professor Nalini. The courses taught at academic centers and the dialogue among scholars need to conceptualize heritage in cross-disciplinary terms. At the same time, we need to encourage participation of young professionals and scholars to develop new paradigms to argue traditional methodologies about and doing heritage, and bringing in the forefront the interests of the marginalized and the excluded. At 75, India and its heritage can act as a major non-Western paradigm in the field of heritage. Thank you. Yes, Shubhro, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Athre. May I request Dr. Arun Menon, if he's here, NSC counselor from ICOMOS India, to share his views.
Very good evening to everybody. Very happy to see everyone. It's after a long while that we're having such a good program, and I must, on behalf of ICOMOS here as the NSC counselor, very happy to see this exercise. I'm calling it an exercise because it's an important dialogue and an important work that we have to really engage in. And it's really good to see the lead taken by NSC Theophil with NSC ICH, NSC Cultural Landscape coming together and looking at the Northeast Zone as a collaborating partner in this important dialogue. And I think this is an area, an important juncture, an opportunity is being taken up for which I really compliment the group. I don't think we have answers at all here. We do see how the Indian context very often runs into contrast with what the existing principles that ICOMOS has been talking of in the last 5 decades, which really makes the space for new thinking, contextual thinking, especially for a complex country and landscape, sacred landscape that India brings to the world. So it's very interesting. Few months ago, almost a year and a half ago, we had a similar discussion, particularly in the context of the 20th century heritage and issues of development and how do you look at, you already have a whole stock of ancient heritage to take care of, and then you're talking of the 20th century heritage, and you have a lot of developmental pressures. And in the context of a program that was being conducted by the NSC 20th century, and Theophil also being involved, Professor A.G.K. Menon was also mentioning that even in that context, do we have an answer for a developing country like India, which has to look at modern infrastructure for vast majority of its population? And how do you strike this balance between existing infrastructure with heritage value and the new infrastructure that's required? So I think on several contexts, we need to apply our mind and have such dialogues which will really open up new perspectives and new vistas for more appropriate solutions, which through culture, we will be able to bring equity in this world. And I think that is an important message that we must take forward from today's discussion. So thank you. I really thank all the speakers who have really brought new directions to an already complex area of discussion on behalf of ICOMOS India as the NSC councils. Thank you once again to everybody. And over to you, Mr. Brugupta. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Menon. May I request Dr. Reema Huja, Vice President of ICOMOS India, to give her concluding remarks for today's presentations.
Thank you very much, Shubhru. Thank you to all of our speakers, actually, and all the people who did intervene and all the people who did not, but who, like me, I take time to react to what I hear, except when I have to make a quick remark when I do a shortcut. As always, it is a pleasure to take in even a little bit of the wisdom that floats around when all of us get together. And my apologies for not having been able to stay throughout, but that also underlines something, how priorities sometimes get fixed. Whether we talk about culture and heritage, or we talk about what we are doing, sometimes the constraints are such. Sometimes, in this case, what I'm getting at is that the guiding principles for conservation that emerged in the 20th century, which are being talked about or challenged, or which we are finding replacements for, came out of a certain context. To bring it closer to home, the reason I couldn't join in totally all the time was because where I'm now working had a certain call on my time. But we do live in that world. We do have to live with the realities of what we are faced with, which brings me to not my saying why I couldn't be here full time, but to saying why a large number of our own citizens are not so engaged. That's not excusing what is happening. Sorry, my phone is making noises. That is not to excuse what happens or what does not happen, but that is to give a perspective on why a large chunk of the Indian population at this point is not thinking so much about our built and intangible or the heritage or other things around us. They might have desires to do so. To excuse me for a second, I do this deliberately just to impress people. Right. I haven't been able to mute them. I told you I do this to impress people. One point I do want to start with, and I'm not turning into a philosopher, but it's going to sound like I am. Things are not permanent. They are transient, they are impermanent. And when I'm here, I'm not talking about, as I said, philosophy, though one could, but that is that what we think today in the 21st century is built upon the thinking that has gone on in the past, the way some of our disciplines, most of our disciplines have developed. I'm saying most, and I'm saying some, because it does not hold true for each discipline that exists that are being studied. But the knowledge that what is good today, what we come up with today after all our discussions, will be suiting a particular point, particular response to a question, but will need to be revised as we go along. That is a realization that I do want to underline, because then the next point that I do come to is there such a thing as true uniqueness in culture? Can I truly say that my perspective as an Indian cannot be duplicated by somebody else's? I think we are agreed. We would not put it quite so bluntly or crudely or so unrefinedly. What we would say, is, which we are saying, is that there are circumstances, there is an understanding on which we have developed, our shared experiences, our shared geographies, our shared histories in the plural, not one single history, but histories, our responses to the climate in which we have built in certain ways, the interchanges we have had with other areas within the country, within what is today the boundaries of a country, within a larger geographical zone. These are what go to develop our culture, and then sometimes our attitude to heritage, and sometimes our reasons for challenging that heritage. And this then brings me to the point of, it has been wonderful to hear the voices today, because these voices are the ones that are teaching and engaging with Indians across, or with humans across the globe, with students, with minds, with even adult minds. So it is a constant process. But I always then wonder about the voices that we are not able to hear, despite our reaching out. So what happens to those many voices that we want to communicate with and share with in order to develop a better understanding of heritage, heritage studies, culture, priorities in looking at World Heritage sites, in looking after World Heritage sites, in listing sites? So this, whose voices, how many voices, how do we communicate and share, then brings us to what we are doing today. The start of yet another of the brilliant discussions that happen when like-minded people get together. And like-minded people don't have to think alike. They are like-minded in their purpose, but they can think contrary to each other. That is what develops on basis of mutual discussions. And then we come to something that we are challenging. So inclusiveness means we have to have everyone having access to understanding about culture, to understanding about heritage, and including them. But it does not, by the same token, mean that if the vast majority vote, if they're ever asked to, on whether, or a small minority of, say, bureaucrats want to demolish a building just because they feel it has outlived its usefulness, then that means that the true inclusiveness is not really happening. Then we have not been able to communicate, we've not been able to convince people. And this then leads me to my next point, which is bringing me back to priorities. How can we prioritize in the minds of young students, in the minds of those who are not engaged with culture and heritage, in the minds of those who feel that the past is a dead world and has no role in the future? How can we make them understand that they need to prioritize, they need to bring this way of thinking into their worldview? It's not impossible, but it's something we've been breaking our heads against. And yet, as I said, because it's not impossible, because we have so many seniors here today whose results are obvious in the changes they have made in ourselves. What we are, we owe to our teachers, to our understanding, to our teachers in the broadest sense, whether you want to have, a guru, a parent, somebody else, a peer group member even. And then that just brings me more or less to my final couple of points, which is when we start defining approaches that might be kind of Indian or South Asian or regional specific. We need to bring all of this on board. We need to put it there and then say, where is it that we are going to be the gainers, and where is it we should shed baggage? And from that, the point that I was just hearing Nalini and then Chubru comment to with, which was how more and more interdisciplinary discussions and approaches need to come together, particularly when we are talking on the 50th year of the World Heritage Convention, the 75th year of the independence, and of course, the 10th year of ICOMOS India being reformulated. And that, of course, then brings us back to, I will say Nalini ma'am once, Nalini, because you are the ever young, evergreen, but I do consider you a teacher in the sense of you are a guru for me. So the point that she made about a holistic worldview, and yes, I can see Professor Rana P.B. Singh Bhai Sahab also right there on my screen, Dr. Schaefer, so many of you veterans, seniors. The holistic worldview that we will develop, which will have our own unique, as I said, is there a unique, but our own take on how we understand the world and look at the world, and can protect and preserve and conserve and look after our cultural heritage and our culture and our values, which we know are going to be changing, and which I am sure all of us would be more than happy to sit in on a year from now and say, what did we say last year? Where do we need to go forward on? So I'm going to, having taken a lot of time, which I love to do, but say at the end that it has been yet another wonderful start to a series of discussions that I think the Theophil Society and our other, I did say society, NSC and all the others are going to jointly take us on a not never-ending, permanent journey that changes us, that is going to be changing the world around us. And even if the growing is tough, we're in it together. So once again, from ICOMOS India, from myself, from all of us, let us thank each other for having been participants today on the start of a journey. But the journey has been going on for a while. The journey will continue when we are not here with our voices, but we'll be here with our thoughts that we are leaving behind with others. So once again, thank you everyone for joining in. I think there will be a formal vote of thanks, which saves me the order of saying thank you to people, but thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Huja. Thank you very much for helping us to officially conclude the program today. At the end, the responsibility to give the vote of thanks lies on me. So with this, I sincerely thank our three speakers, Dr. Rana P.B. Singh, Dr. Sanjib Borkakoti, and Mr. D. Paul Schaffer for sharing their valuable learnings with us. I thank all the participants for attending and making this program successful. I thank the ICOMOS India Executive Committee office bearers, Dr. Naveen Piplani, Dr. Reema Huja, Dr. Arun Menon, and Ms. Priyanka Singh for supporting the program. I wholeheartedly thank the working group comprising Professor Nalini Thakur, Dr. Mrinalini Atre, Dr. Rana P.B. Singh, and Mr. Dilip Chamkakoti, who is not here today with us due to some other engagement, for collaborating upon and conceptualizing this program as NSC and region heads. Lastly, I thank the core team, again comprising Nalini ma'am, Mona Lisa Bhardwaj, Rahul Bhola, Ira Godial, for their hard work in organizing this program, as well as Simran and Abel Benny from ICOMOS office for providing technical support for today's Zoom meeting. So with that, we declare the program to be closed. Thank you everyone for, sorry.
Would it be possible for me to have a short, read a short poem before we close?
Should I share the screen? Would you like me to do that? You had shared that through mail, or would you like to read your poem?
I could read my poem. You have it on a sheet there, and if you'd be kind enough to send it out to others, I'd appreciate it. I should let you know that starting in the late 70s up to the mid 90s, I had a lot of correspondence, it was by letters at that time, with my dear friend and cherished colleague, Dr. Prem Kirpal, who may be known to many of you. At the bottom of the poem, you will read more about his achievements. He made some wonderful achievements. I'll just read this to you, it won't take long. Dr. Prem Kirpal was a cherished friend and cultural colleague for many years of mine. Among numerous accomplishments, he was secretary of the Ministry of Education, Government of Industry, chairman, Government of India, chairman of the Executive Board of UNESCO, president of the International Educational Consortium, founder and president of the Institute for Cultural Relations and Development Studies, and author of such books as A Decade of Education in India, Culture and Development, Songs of Psyche, Spirits Musings, and many others. In addition, he was an exceptional poet, an excellent artist who produced many beautiful paintings, and a wonderful person. Part of the work that I've been doing trying to go deeper into culture is to bring to the fore the fact that many cultural scholars and historians and practitioners over the centuries have said very valuable things about the importance of culture and all that's related to that were not only relevant in their own lives at their own time, but are relevant today and particularly relevant going forward into the future. And I'm trying to press upon people that are in the cultural field today that one of the important things we could do is to recognize these people formally, because they're very much part of our own cultural heritages. So here is Dr. Prem Kirpal's poem, The Abiding Quality of Lifetime, conferred by God on each alive, is comprised of care of each other, quest of love and peace of mind, quietness of spirit and sheer delight, of being oneself and belonging to all, loving and loved in lifetime, experiencing bliss and ecstasy, with serenity and creativity. May such quality of life embellish all in time to come for a great new world of humanity. Thank you.
Those are beautiful thoughts, beautiful words. Thank you, Mr. Schaffer. So with this, we close the session.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Good
you very
night.
much, everyone, for attending and being here today.
Picture, Shubhru, a one collective picture
Okay,
for everyone.
okay. I think some people have left already. No, all are here. All are. They switch on their cameras, we'll have a, it's like a group photograph. Still quite a few are not.
Yeah,
Nalini ma'am is not here. Oh, she's there. Yes.
Nalini ma'am is here.
Yes. Mona Lisa.
I may not be able to switch on video, Shubhru. Please excuse me.
Okay. So still some are missing.
I think their names will be shown anyway on the screen.
Yeah.
So
thank you very much, everyone. See you in the next event.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Paul. Prem Ripal was a friend of
Thank
my
you very
parents, so
much
you
for
brought him
everything.
alive. Thank you.
Goodbye.